Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Was Son of White Diamond. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Life is full of surprises. Many people say so. But I bet those people don't expect some outlandish revelation that their mother is an alien ex-queen. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best way to start things up. That came out a little weird. Better to start from the beginning. Like anyone else, I have no memories of my earlier years. I spent the first 3 years of my life in an orphanage. Records say my parents were killed in a villain attack. I barely recollect my time in the orphanage, only that it wasn't good. Quirk, a mutation that gives a person a single, unique ability. Like a power brought out of comic books. Nowadays, 80% of the population has a quirk. They first manifest at about the age of 4. I, on the other hand, I've had this white diamond embedded in my forehead since I was born. In the orphanage, I recall the other kids shunned me because of my anomaly. Honestly, someone having a rock stuck to their skull isn't the weirdest thing you see. There are way more fantastical quirks, but those don't show up when you're still a toddler. Good thing is, those times didn't last. One day, a green-haired lady came and adopted me. Since that day, Inko Midoriya is the only mom I know and care to know. So that's my prologue. Born with a deformity, orphan as a baby, adopted by a kindly woman. When I was 5, my mom took me to a doctor, because my quirk was strange to say the least. More accurately, I did strange things. My diamond could glow and I could make tiny white bubbles. I was thrilled back then, thinking I had finally gotten my quirk. The doctor said different. Your son is quirkless. But Dr. Tsubasa, he has a diamond on his head. Inko pointed at the precious stone. The doctor said DNA analysis and x-rays to my feet indicated an indisputable fact. I am quirkless. As for why I'm so abnormal, according to the record from your orphanage, you were born with that diamond embedded in your frontal bone. It's just as a part of your body as your skull. The doctor explained patiently while showcasing an x-ray of the boy's skull. The frontal bone of the skull had a diamond-shaped hole. Fun fact, diamonds usually don't show up on an X-ray. Yet, the DNA analysis show no quirk factor whatsoever. So this mutation is not the result of a quirk. It's no different than a bone deformity one can be born with. So his diamond is not part of his quirk. Mom was just as confused as me. So it would appear. The doctor nodded like it was completely natural. Please, understand this is very rare, but not unheard of. There have been scarce reports of people, both quirkies and quirkless, with deformities that show no quirk or nothing related to their existing quirks. I remember my mom putting a hand on my shoulder. She squeezed me hard, like she was afraid I'd disappear. At the time, I didn't understand why. And what are you going to do? The doctor eyed her for a moment. Nothing. These anomalies are rare, but from the reports I have, there's never been a case where it harmed the patient's health. Though I advise you allow me to monitor development for the next few months. This won't be made public, if you don't wish it so. So, I don't have powers. If I described today how I felt at that moment, I'd say it was like I was walking on a fine line above an abyss. But I can make this. See, I made a white bubble out of thin hair in between my hands. The doctor gave it a dispassionate look and scratched his beard. You do have powers, but they are not a quirk. More likely they are a mutation, caused by your deformity. He tapped the diamond, making me flinch away. I didn't like that man's touch on my gem. So if I have powers, I can be a hero, right? At that moment, I didn't care if for some reason I had no quirk. If I have powers, then I could be a hero like All Might. He made everything better with a smile on his face. I wanted to be like him so badly. You should probably give up, the doctor said dismissively. Although you have powers, there is the chance they won't last. Plus, I doubt they'll be very useful for a pro hero's profession. It's best for your sake that you give up on that dream. But I didn't give up. And my powers didn't just disappear. If anything, new ones showed. I learned that I could control the light my gem makes, making it a beam or a scattered light. I can also make bubbles to put my things in. My room is full of them. It's neat. As for other powers that came along, they're harder to control. Like I found out I have super strength ... but it doesn't always work. I only did it once when I tried to lift a big rock that fell over some other kid's backpack. I was 7 at the time, and it weighted like it was made of air. I was just as shocked as the kid I helped out. When I tried a second time, no go. I spent the rest of the day trying to call it out, but never came. After that event, my super strength only showed up sporadically. But luckily in moments that was really a godsend. Like one time when Kaken was being particularly violent against other kids. Another power that only came when it suited it was some kind of resistance to damage. When I was walking in the woods with Kaken and his friends, I tripped on a log over a big ravine and made a hard landing on the bottom. It was about 6 meters high and full of rocks, yet I didn't even feel sore. Not a scratch. Too bad later, when Kaken challenged me to a fight, I ended up bruised from head to toe. I have the worst luck, sometimes. Present day. Wow, a new pro. Izuku Midoriya's white eyes sparkled at the image of the colossal woman. And it's a giant woman. Today, the white-haired, 14-year-old boy was making his way to school when he got a news update on his iPhone. A villain fight had broken out and pro heroes were trying to contain it. He ran there just in time to see a new pro hero making her debut, Mount Lady. After the dust settled, Izuku mumbled his own writings. Quirk, gigantification. She can increase her size to easily taller than a 5-story building. I wonder what happens to her metabolism. Can she change her size to only that height? You a hero fanboy? A random civilian spoke to Izuku, luring his attention. Let me guess, you're aiming to be a pro, too. Best of luck, kid. The man gave him a thumbs up. Thank you, sir. Izuku smiled widely. That trademark smile, coupled with his big irises of color white which made his diamond pupils look very small in comparison, gave the boy a somewhat disturbing appearance. That made the man flinch a little. People are always uncomfortable when I smile. I should come up with a new one. No way. All Might always smiles to show people that everything will be alright. I'll do the same. Izuku arrived just in time for class. Not that he would have been greatly bothered if he missed it. Today, it was going at a snail's pace. He barely paid any attention to the teacher talking about the future of his students. The diamond bearer much preferred to flip through his notebook of heroes. At last, the man said something that caught his interest. Now that you're all third years, you need to think about your future. I'll pass you handouts, but... The man made a flamboyant gesture. I figured you're all going to the hero course. Everyone promptly showed off their quirk, except for Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku shrugged and joined in the fanfare. The jewel that was part of his being produced white lights like a merle ball. Not as strong the white-haired boy would have wished. But then again, when as Izuku had absolute control over his fickle powers. The fanfare stopped when Bakugo smugly spoke out. You're all going to heroics, you extras. But you'll all be stuck at the bottom. I'm aiming for the top. I'll go to UA and reach beyond all might. The whispers of awe ran amok. In spite of his dismissive and mocking attitude towards everyone else, the whole class still respected and looked up to the explosive blonde. Katsuki Bakugo never let any obstacles stand in his way. That was why, deep down, Izuku still looked up to him. Oh, right. Only you and Midoriya are aiming to be accepted in UA. The teacher reiterated as an afterthought. Most of the class continued their criticism against Bakugo, regarding that tidbit of information as unimportant, though Izuku did hear a few comments. He is, but what's his quirk, anyways? I don't think he can even control it. Maybe they'll train him to headbutt villains. I hear he does that when he panics. When you have a rock that is a part of you, weird eyes of white irises and diamond-shaped pupils, a load of naturally disheveled white hair that always grows 5 points in different directions like a star, and a small collection of different powers, people automatically assume you have a quirk. But I don't have. Science says so, according to Dr. Tsubasa. I'm just different, quirkless and different. And when I try to tell them I'm actually quirkless, they assume I'm either joking or self-conscious about my diamond. After class was dismissed, Izuku picked up his notebook. He was looking forward to add the notes he wrote down about Mount Lady's debut this morning. Hey, Deku Diamond. Bakugo Katsuki suddenly stomped his hand on his desk. Deku Diamond was the insult that Kaken branded him with for years. A useless diamond, that's what he was. Listen up, you daydreaming nerd. I heard what the teach said. I'm the only one from this mediocre junior high school who will get the pleasure of applying for UA. He looked Izuku very close in the eye. So be a good-for-nothing diamond and don't apply. Why not? Izuku protested. Sure, I don't have a quirk as awesome as yours, but I can still be a hero. Bakugo jeered. As if. You think you can stand up to villains with your flashy light shows or head-butting them with that ass-fake jewelry on your head? He snapped said jewel, as if to prove it was fake. He subtly recoiled his fingers. That flick on the hard stone apparently hurt a little. He continued as if none of that happened. Anyways, don't even try to apply, or else. He placed a smoking hand on Izuku's shoulder for effect. Izuku started panicking. And when he panics, he's got this reflex-like instinct to headbutt the danger away. Without warning, he was pushed back against a wall by an explosion. Thought I didn't see that coming, you freak. Bakugo towered over him, a smirk wilder than anything Izuku could come up with. You can't catch me off guard again with those same old cheap tricks. So stay down where you belong, you weirdo. I should mention that I once headbutted Kaken when we were little. I think it was the first time he looked really menacing to me. I tried to defend another kid against Kaken. He got angry and attacked. Out of fear, I just headbutted him. He was out cold with a bleeding bruise, so I took him home. It was nothing serious, though. Even though I apologized, he wouldn't speak to me for more than a month. Izuku walked home alone, as usual. He was never one for having many friends. His classmates often found him weird because, well, he was weird. Between his obsession over quirks, nerdy behavior, strange quirk that he didn't seem to have a complete hang-on and somewhat crazy appearance, Midoriya Izuku was kind of a loner. While walking absent-mindedly into a tunnel, he took a breath and slapped his cheeks. Okay, never mind what others say. I will become a hero. I can make things better. Hello there. A gurgling voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Above was a dark green slime with eyes and a big, sinister smile. Avil. The slime rained down on Izuku. He found himself unable to move or breath. The villain had him and began forcing his way into the boy's mouth. Finally, a meat sack I can use for a disguise. You're my hero, kid. Now stop struggling. This will only hurt for a while. The sludge looked greedily at his gem. What's this? You got some jewelry on you. I'll be taking that when I dig your corpse. No, I don't want to die like this. Not like this, please. Izuku's gem burst with light, filling the small tunnel in light. The villain shrieked. Izuku found himself able to breathe freely again. Exhaustion immediately took him away. Izuku woke up to the feeling of soft but repetitive slaps on his face. Young man, are you all right? His groggy eyes snapped open. He instantly recognized the iconic grin. All Might, the mountain of a man, the legendary No One Pro hero, laughed loudly. That's right, my boy. There's no need for fear, for I am here. The Diamond Boy entered a frenzy. First he thought he was still dreaming or hallucinating. Then he frantically searched for his notebook for an autograph, only to verify the pro had done it already. He had gracefully signed up his notebook. Think nothing of it. The hero spoke boisterously. I'm so sorry you became involved in my pursuit of this villain. Though I was pleased to see you didn't require my help at all. All Might lifted a glass bottle containing the green sludge. When I got here, I saw a light going out. You and this misbehaving boy were both passed out on the tunnel. I take it that was your quirk. The man gave a short glance to the brilliant jewel on his forehead. Actually, I must deliver this villain to the police. And I must say, with such a handy quirk, I'm sure you'd make a wonderful pro someday. Izuku's attempt to clarify his quirk died. His eyes shifted into the shape of 5 pointed stars. That was his starry-eyed look. Whenever Izuku was excited about something or just very happy, his eyes became shaped like stars. Sir, you're saying I can really be a hero. I've always wanted to be a hero like you. It's my dream to make everything better. Everything better. All Might laughed. My boy, wishing to make the world a better place is a noble cause. I wish you the best of luck, even if I don't have hang on my powers. Boy, nothing worth achieving is easy to get. All Might waved a finger. Being a hero takes a lot of training, including on how to master your quirk. Again was the misunderstanding, but it went completely ignored. He was being encouraged by All Might of all people. Izuku bowed. All Might, I promise I will work hard to control my powers to help people. Izuku ran home with a speed abnormal for someone with so little fitness. He left a faint trail of white light behind him, his face adorned by that wide grin and starry-eyed. So enthusiastic he felt that quick stop he had to make before home was almost forgotten. Oh no, I forgot to pass by Mr. Moy's to pick up the bread. He slapped himself. Resigned, but not undetermined, he took off in another direction. After crossing a few streets, he reached his destination, a large, somewhat crowded bakery named Bingo Bongo Sweets. Izuku made his way inside, passing by the other customers. He was here to pick up the bread his mom had phoned ahead for. So, how is our hero to be today? To his delight, he was attended by the owner of the bakery, Mr. Moy. Izuku grinned from ear to ear. I'm here for the bread. You got it. The man, Matthew Moy, was of American nationality and possessed a very youthful appearance for a grown-up. He moved to Japan 6 years ago and opened this successful bakery. The man had a curious mutation-type quirk that made his skin and hair pink. The oddest part were his earlobes. They were shaped like donuts, round and hold. The pink man handed him a bag with the required bread, warm and releasing a pleasant smell of butter. To Izuku's surprise, he was also handed a small bag with foreign sweets. These are for you and your mom. They're on the house, Little Diamond. Mr. Moy used the old nickname he gave Izuku. The man was an old acquaintance of him and Midoriya & Co. since they visited Bingo Bongo Sweets upon its debut. Matthew Moy was a good-natured person who got endeared to Izuku. Quickly the boy and mother became regular customers. Thank very much, Mr. Moy. The boy accepted, knowing that refusing would be impolite. Oh, can you believe I met All Might just now? Really? The pink man quirked an eyebrow. The man subtly ignored the other customers and paid close attention to Izuku's story. Well, Little Diamond, let no one tell you now that you can't be a hero. Bingo Bongo. The baker said his catchphrase, making pistol gestures with his hands. Izuku made his signature creepy grin and departed. Moy chuckled a tad nervously and went back to attending a client, a short, elderly woman walking with a cane. Good morning, Shuzenji. What can I do for you? Once Izuku got home, he blabbed the misadventure to his mother. Inko was understandably frightened, and then relieved. My light knocked out the sludge villain. I think I found a new power. Or maybe it's just my old one, but with a new capability. Oh, Izuku, I'm just glad you're safe and sound, son. It's all right, Mom. He hugged to comfort her. After doing a few chores, he went for his room. The walls were decorated with hero posters, most of all were All Mights. Also other pro-hero merchandise like his desk lamp UA-themed, or the Endeavor calendar, among others. The most interesting feature, however, were the many white, translucent bubbles floating about. Each one had one of his belongings. Izuku leaped and grasped the bubble with a large notebook inside and popped it. Later, he wrote down the notes about Mount Lady on the notebook of quirks. On his personal page was a summary of the powers he had discovered over the years. My powers. Light show. I can make my diamond shine, be it a beam of light or scattered. Easy enough to control. When I'm in danger, the light glows the brightest and stun both me and the attacker. Verified by the attack of the sludge villain. Bubble. The bubbles I make can float in midair and are perfect for storing stuff. Easy enough to control, too. Super strength. Happens very rarely and not when I want it. I think it only activates when I'm in danger. Super endurance, resistance to physical damage, also impossible to control. Apparently only activates when my life is on the line. This won't do. Not at all. I have to improve. I have to make myself better. Plenty of targets for practice. Secluded enough. On Dagaba Beach, Izuku was surrounded by trash in every direction. He took a breath in wary preparation. A notebook laid opened on the page wrote on, last night. It was a training plan for his powers, with theories and ideas of how they could be used in combat or rescue. Okay, let's start with bubbles. Creating bubbles was as natural to Izuku as breathing. It was the very first power he had gained, at the end of his kindergarten years. The bubbles were always translucent and white, able to float in midair if he let them. They were handy to store many of his personal items in his room. It kept things at hand without filling up compartments or shelves. Normally, bubbles would be useless in combat. They're very light and easy to pop. However, Izuku could produce them with varying hardness. Downside was, the harder it was, the longer it took. Standard bubbles were produced instantly, and they were about as hard as glass. Once, he made a bubble hard enough that it took dropping a big rock on it to pop it. Let's give it a try. He extended his hand and frowned. It always felt like a mass of energy flowed from his gem to his hand. The bubble was a little larger than an orange and was just as light as the standards. He checked the chronometer. Took almost 30 seconds. Time to test it. He spotted a barely rusty chassis amidst the garbage. Izuku hurled the bubble at it with all the might he had. The bubble popped upon impact, much to Izuku's dismay, which quickly turned to some satisfaction upon seeing big dent where the bubble hit. Progress. He smiled, starry-eyed. He diligently wrote down on his notebook, I can make bubbles hard enough to damage steel if I throw them. Yet, hard bubbles are just as light as standard ones, which doesn't make sense. If hard bubbles are harder, shouldn't they be denser and heavier? I need more research on this, for later. He made a note to investigate the conundrum later. The next experiments were meant to refine the first when he tried to create hard bubbles. Turned out, the more time he concentrates in creating a bubble, the harder the bubble is. Izuku made another note. The amount of time is somewhat directly proportional to the hardness. If instantaneous meant a soft bubble, 30 seconds made one capable of denting steel manufactured to handle constant heavy loads. Following, he tossed bubbles of varying time spans at random objects. The longest he had done was a 1-minute bubble. That one had punched a hole halfway through a mountain of trash and made it collapse. Izuku wisely decided not to try anything so destructive soon. 30 seconds, even 1 minute isn't much. But in a fight, much can happen in just 1 second. He would know, after years of viewing and reviewing hero versus villain battles. He looked over a 15-second bubble. Those were good against softer metals, like aluminum, but no more. This won't do. I need to make strong bubbles as quickly as I make soft ones. He summoned an instantaneous bubble and compared the two. They were the same size, and both weighed the same, which was barely anything. Yet, only one of them made a somewhat decent cannonball. How can two things look so similar but be so different? Izuku dismissed both bubbles in frustration. It nagged at him he couldn't even begin to make sense of his own powers. People with actual quirks didn't have this much trouble. Following more frustration, useless attempts to figure out an explanation, Izuku gave up on it. Maybe Dr. Tsubasa has an idea. I'll ask him in our next scheduled checkup, he proposed to himself. Dr. Tsubasa was the man his mom took him to at the ripe age of 4 when they still believed his diamond was an early awakening quirk. The doctor was the one to reveal Izuku was a very, very rare case, a quirkless child with powers. The diamond he was born with on his forehead was a non-quirk deformity that gave him his abilities. The doctor was kind enough to keep it a secret to avoid too much public attention. For the following years, they went for the man for checkups to see if anything harmful came out of this non-quirk mutation. Thankfully, those fears were unfounded, but the bi-monthly checkups continued by the doctor's insistence. Back to the testing. Training, Izuku was making very little progress. The main issue was how long it took to make hard bubbles. Big and tough bubbles. Hold it. Something doesn't have to be big in order to be tough. Izuku grinned creepily from ear to ear. He may have just found the solution. The time needed to create bubbles didn't depend solely on how hard they were, but also on their ring. His train of thoughts was promptly stopped. His phone started ringing. He picked up. Yes, Mom. Izuku, honey, it's almost noon. Lunch is ready. The white-haired one gasped, checking the hours. Oh, man. I'm sorry, Mom. I lost track of time. I'm on Dagobah Beach, sorry. I'm running home now. Okay, I'll keep the food warm for you. Was it just him? Or did Mom sound a bit strange? And Izuku, there's someone here who wants to talk to you about your incident with that slime villain. Izuku blinked. Much to his chagrin, Izuku had to slow down several times to regain his breath. His stamina left quite a lot to be desired. The race back home lasted longer than he wished. Maybe he should look into training his body as well. I'm home, Mom, he announced upon entry. He found her sitting on the couch in the living room with a cup of warm tea in her hands. Sitting from across her was a lean, gentle-looking man of short raven hair and sharp look. Izuku bowed to the stranger, whom got up and respectfully reciprocated. Good day, Izuku Midoriya. I am Nomasa Tsukachi, a detective, and I've come here to ask you a few details about your encounter with the sludge villain. Izuku nodded, sitting down on the couch. His mom looked apprehensive, but just a little. Detective Tsukachi gave off a good-natured presence. Now, do you mind if I call you Izuku? The man asked with a gentle smile. Izuku agreed, and the detective said he could call him by his first name, too, to which the white-haired kid politely declined. Izuku, as I understand, you were ambushed by the sludge villain, whom we have identified as Shinya Fukumatsu. Fortunately, you were able to save yourself with a flash of light of sorts before All Might arrived, correct? Izuku confirmed it. Tsukachi asked him to give a detailed description of the event. Izuku did so. In hindsight, the fact he could have died still made him just a little tense. His mother, however, was more affected. She was quiet during the ordeal. Her hands trembled a bit while grasping her cup with too much force. Tsukachi nodded. I'm going to be quite direct. Izuku, I am here because whatever it was you did to Fukumatsu, it seems to have erased his memory of his last few days up to that point. Izuku blinked. The detective continued. After All Might handed Fukumatsu to the police, we interrogated him. He genuinely had no recollection how he ended up on that situation. After more days of interrogation, we discerned he lost his memories of the previous 93 hours. Isuzu's eyes were wide opened. Are you saying I erased his memory? Apparently, whether or not those memories will come back, or when, only time will tell. Izuku was stiff. He had caused someone amnesia without even knowing he was capable of it. Tsukachi must have deduced what he thought. I understand you are a very rare case, virtually unique. Izuku, I checked your records, quirkless and yet with some quirk-like abilities. Tsukachi casted a very brief glance at the gemstone. He spoke soothingly. Therefore, there are no laws that can apply to your case. Plus, your life was in danger and you reacted on instinct. Then his tone became stern. However, it still stands the fact that you have caused harm to someone else. Even if said harm is minimal or temporary, it's irrelevant, young man. He would have continued, hadn't Izuku interrupted him. Is he all right? Tsukachi frowned. Mr. Fukumatsu, is he all right? Tsukachi answered almost instantly. Yes, he's safely under custody, at a villain hospital. Isuzu hesitated with his next question. He's not allowed visitors, is he? Isuzu had read villain hospitals had such security their patients couldn't get visitors, save for extremely rare cases. No, he's not. Why do you ask? Tsukachi quilted an eyebrow. Izuku looked embarrassed. I wanted to apologize for messing with his memories. Tsukachi was speechless for just a moment. In spite of him trying to kill you, he must think I'm stupid for it. Izuku mentally berated himself while weakly nodded. The detective was quiet for another moment before his face adopted a warm smile. Not a professional, soothing one like before. You truly are an honest kid. There was a pause and the detective returned to his professional mode. Understand, Izuku, you are not being charged of any crime, but this incident could have been much worse. Quirk or not, your power can be dangerous if you don't control it. That is any citizen's duty, not just a hero's. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Before he left, Tsukachi asked for their doctor's contact. It was a bit late for lunch when mother and son started eating. The meal was awkward, to say the least. His mother asked more than once if he was all right. Izuku would gently reply everything was fine. The detective's revelation hammered in his head. Mr. Tsukachi is right. Even if this was just a fluke, I can't let it happen again. I need to control all of my powers if I'm going to be a hero. The next day, Dagobah Municipal Beach was once again his training field. He started much earlier than the previous day. The first sun rays were shyly reaching over the horizon, behind the mountains of garbage. Snap, smash. On one of said mountains, an old TV broke apart as a marble-sized white object went right through it at bullet speed. Izuku turned to another target and repeated the exercise. He snapped away one tiny, marble-sized bubble. The insignificantly light projectile, with the hardness of a diamond, would travel on a beeline for the target. Diamond smash. Smash it. Izuku grinned with success, his pupils taking on the shape of stars. The round, white bullets pierced plastics and metals like hot butter with ease. He wrote down a note, brimming with excitement. The bullet bubbles were a success. As it turns out, the time it takes to create a bubble depends both on the intended hardness and size. Making hard bubbles for smashing things takes too much time. But if I make them very small, it cuts back on the time. Bullet bubbles take about 5 to 10 seconds to make, each. Maybe with more practice, I can find a way to cut back even more on production time. But when he looked over the broke-down, scattered litter, Izuku's triumph turned sour. In hindsight, he had made a bigger mess than the place already was. Just like with the sludge villain, he thought, remembering the sludge villain. The Diamond Boy clenched his fists, determined to get absolute control over his abilities. Maybe I should work on making my aim more precise, to avoid spreading the damage. Good morning, kiddo. Startled, Izuku turned around to meet a familiar face. Mr. Moy. It was the chief of the bakery who was friends with the Midoriyas. Matthew Moy was a man of very youthful appearance, pink skin and whole earlobes. Good morning. Training to be a hero, I see. Moy leaned against a railing. He was wearing light, running clothes. Yeah, I have to control my powers better, he added in the privacy of his thoughts, especially after what I was told yesterday. Moy hummed. I was finishing my morning run. Mind if I rest for a bit around here? Izuku was conflicted. He wasn't comfortable with the idea of an audience, but there was no way he could refuse the man who had been so kind to him and his mother. Self-conscious, Izuku agreed and went back to his training. Fortunately, Mr. Moy was a quiet observer. Izuku grew more relaxed as he fired away his cannon bubbles. This time he worked on his aim, trying to tear apart only large objects so he could concentrate the damage on a spot instead of just scattering it. Time passed and the boy almost forgot about the spectator, but was reminded of such when Mr. Moy spoke out. You know, Izuku, as handy as those bubbles can be, not all heroes are fighters. Have you thought about any rescuing moves? Izuku shrugged. More or less. I think I can launch a bubble at an object, enter it and then order it to come to me. But only small stuff, Moy suggested. Why don't you train your light powers, too? The memory of what he learnt the previous day silenced any reply to that. What he had done to another person, even if he was a villain, made his stomach sick. The pink man noticed the somber look on his face. Is everything okay? Izuku sighed. He hadn't spoken about it with anyone else, not even Mom despite her pleads. He had come to the beach early to work off these negative feelings. Now they were back, so Izuku spilled them. He told the baker his encounter with the sludge villain. What the detective revealed his powers had done to the man. By the time he was done, Izuku stared down at his feet like a scolded child, even though Moy had said nothing. While the boy looked dejected with himself, Moy was hesitant on what to do. He sighed and said, everyone makes mistakes, whether intentional or not. You didn't even know your light could mind wipe people. What you did was just instinct kicking in, right? Izuku nodded slowly. And there wasn't much harm done, right? Another nod. Then be glad for that. When I make a mistake, I find it best to look at how much I can make up for it. It also helps to think how much worse it could have been. You've learned your powers can cause harm, but they didn't cause too much and now you know it. He let that be absorbed. Izuku's face turned up, losing some of its gloomy look. Maybe you can't take back what you've done now. When it comes to mistakes that can't be undone, all we can do is try our best not to repeat them. Izuku took a heavy breath. He glanced at the spots of trash where he had practiced his shooting. That must be why he was an early bird today. Probably felt he needed to get the hang of his powers. The man of American descent mused. You're right. I screwed up. That's all the more reason I need to control my powers. Izuku looked over the craters and holes he made. Still needed a lot of work. Moy put a gentle hand on his shoulder. He declared kindly, for what it's worth, the simple fact that you're concerned for someone who tried to do you wrong shows your true hero material. The pink man looked him over with a look that felt a bit nostalgic. Any remainder of Izuku's bleak disposition disappeared after hearing that. Moy asked curiously, this mind wipe power, you never did anything like it before, right? And no, Izuku then pondered. Come to think of it, it activated when I thought I was really going to die. He couldn't help but shudder at the memory. Like my super strength and endurance, those powers only kicked in when I really needed them to avoid getting hurt. I was never able to use them on command. Maybe my most powerful abilities are like that. Okay, enough with that, mutter kid. Just go back to your training. The pink man rolled his eyes amusingly, much to Izuku's embarrassment. July 14th. It was on the day before Izuku's birthday that he was scheduled for the bi-monthly medical checkup. Following the routine X-rays, Izuku revealed his discoveries to Dr. Tsubasa, particularly the conundrum about the bubble. The doctor confessed he couldn't have much help, as he was no physicist. I do have a theory about this density paradox. The doctor scratched his thick mustache. He examined a bubble Izuku created per his request. I think these bubbles work as a projection of the natural hardness of your gemstone. My diamond's hardness. Izuku blinked. As you know, diamonds are among the hardest natural materials, and you've reported when you create your bubbles, you have a sensation going from your gem to your hand. That might be your diamond transferring its own properties to your bubbles. Izuku nodded a bit doubtfully. Honestly, that explanation didn't sound scientifically solid, but he wasn't about to offend the good doctor. This man had been nothing but helpful over the years, going as far as to maintain a level of secrecy about the nature of Izuku's gemstone. I can't make promises, but I will speak to an associate of mine. With discretion, of course, the doctor assured him. Maybe he'll have some insight. In the meantime, please inform me of any new discoveries. Yes, thank you very much, doctor. The white-haired boy bowed gratefully. The doctor chuckled. You're welcome, my boy, and happy birthday. July 15th. Happy birthday, son. Thanks, Mom. Izuku Midoriya turned 15 today. As usual, the celebration was at home. No one of Izuku's age was present, just him and his mother. On occasion he got a text from a school acquaintance or a wish of a happy birthday, but nothing more. He got along with other kids, but none of them were his friends. He was too weird. It didn't bother him, though. You should thank Mr. Moy later, son. He spent all morning working on this. It has her favorite, peach and kiwi. He assured her before taking a bite out of the first piece while the mother had her own. They had a more or less one-sided conversation. Izuku narrated the discoveries he made with his powers. Well, I'm off back to the beach. Izuku, his mother called, looking and sounding a bit hesitant. What is it, Mom? She turned to a package leaning against a wall and picked it up, giving it an odd look. While you were out, this just came through the mail. It's for you, but it's anonymous. Izuku approached the box. There was a small note attached to it. Your mother entrusted this to me for safekeeping. Now I give it to you, as part of your heritage. Keep it close. Happy birthday, little diamond. Little diamond, he muttered. So, whoever sent it must know who he is, and had known his biological mother. In all honesty, Izuku never cared much to learn about his biological family. He was just an infant when they perished in the fire caused by a villain. He was mildly curious, though, but for someone to send it anonymously. The white-haired boy wasn't one for being paranoid, but this looked suspicious at best. Still, curiosity was making some noise. Izuku, maybe it's best that you don't open it, the mother advised, and Izuku knew that was the right thing to do. But curiosity kept eating at him. He knew if he didn't open it now, it would consume him until he caved in. I'll just take a peek first. He did so and used his gem to illuminate the inside. He blinked. It was a fist-sized octahedron. Each facet had one of the 4 colors: white, yellow, blue, and pink. 2 colors for each facet. Slowly he pulled the object out and showed it to his mother, whom was just as confused. The octahedron had a smooth texture and the facets reflected some light, like they were made of crystal, yet it was incredibly light. What is it? The mother asked, more to herself than her child. Funny, Izuku noted that. The object being like 2 pyramids attached to each other at their bases. The 4 colors were all distributed equally on both halves, meaning each pyramid had one of the 4 hues. Also, they were not in the same order, only the 2 white faces were adjacent. Maybe it's a piece of art, Inko suggested. Out of curiosity, Izuku grabbed the top half and, surprisingly, it span. So, it wasn't a stone or a sculpture or even a single piece. He rotated the upper part until the 2 blue facets were adjacent. Nothing happened. Maybe it's just a toy, like a Rubik Cube. Izuku frowned. A Rubik Cube would at least be a challenging toy. This felt more like a baby's challenge. Frankly, the idea that someone out there sent him a baby toy for a present left Izuku quite miffed. Then again, the object carried an appearance perhaps a bit too regal to be a mere toy. I'll check this out later. He settled to put it back in the box and leave in his room. He had his still elusive powers to work on. A month later, my training with bubbles has bore fruit. Aside from offensive capabilities, I developed other uses for them for rescuing. For example, I can launch a bubble to capture objects in midair and bring them safely down. Izuku took a short break from his documentation to gather his thoughts. He was writing more than just a page dedicated to his powers. It was a journal of his experiments and the results. It's been 2 months and I think it's time I turn my attention to my light-based powers. He paused again, this time in hesitation. The light beams I can emit from my diamond are just that, light. I use it just for illumination. For heroics, they could be used to spot villains, civilians in the dark, or used as a flare to signal my location. As for offensive capabilities, I doubt I can do more than blinding enemies. Another pause. This time longer and more hesitating. Honestly, I've been avoiding that subject for a while. Since Detective Tsukachi's visit, guess I've been a bit afraid of touching the subject. My light never did anything like that. I assume the mind wipe is another power that only kicks in when my life is in danger. Like the detective said, quirk or not, your power can be dangerous if you don't control it. I must do this, if not for the entrance exam, then at least to try and make sure it doesn't happen again. I don't know if training my ordinary light will prevent another mind wipe fluke, but for sure I must try. Weeks later, light blast. A beam of light was projected from his gem and hit a trash pile. Some of the trash was burnt, the rest simply knocked aside. Izuku sighed. Aim is still a little off. He pulled out his notebook, looking over the already written chapter. Turns out if I concentrate enough, I can pour more energy into my light, make it into actual concentrated energy blasts. Nowhere near as destructive as Kakens. They're good for knocking stuff away. I doubt they would do more than stun a person, but I'm not about to test them on people. Plus, using too much power gives me a headache. Perhaps when I get into UA, they will have the means to test how dangerous my energy blasts can be. Until then, use them minimally. Izuku began writing another paragraph. Light blasts are coming along, but I still need to perfect my aim. It would be much better if I could just fire them from my hands. Unfortunately, energy projection from my hands doesn't come off easy, and training doesn't seem to be helping it along. Sighing, Izuku aimed his palm at the trash pile a few meters away. There was the familiar rush of energy traveling down his arm. Only instead of spawning a bubble in his palm, a humble blast of light fired. It never connected with the target. Instead, it withered out and dissipated halfway. Izuku facepalmed. No use. Guess I'll have to stick with head blasts. An hour later, Izuku was through with his morning run and passed by the opening Bingo Bongo Sweets. Mr. Moi was an early bird that day and had the butter bagels warm and ready for pickup. They were Mom's favorite ever since the pink man introduced her to them. Here you go, big hero. The man handed him a bag. The sweet aroma was welcomed into Izuku's nostrils. So, how's training coming along? Good enough, I'd say. He smiled wearily. Much better than the light beam training, anyways. Glad to hear it. Moi went to inspect another batch of baked goods. They looked like oversized beans of bread and were unfamiliar to Izuku, which was a seldom case. Mr. Moi was ever eager to show and sometimes offer his creations to the Midoriyas. Mr. Moi, what are those? Oh, these. You can call them a work in progress. The man scowled a little. I've been trying to adapt an old recipe of filled cakes into this form of bread. Izuku empathized with the pink man. He too had issues with his recent lack of personal progress. See, the bread is actually a very thin layer. The inside is a chocolate filling that hardens a little once cold. That way, when you take a bite, it doesn't spill all over. Izuku looked over the sweets. A thin shell encasing a sweet but potentially messy substance. The white-haired gasped. I've got it. The shout startled Moi. Izuku beamed at him, starry-eyed. Thanks, Mr. Moi. I figured it out. He pointed the work in progress. These sweet are the answer. They have a lot of fillings that wants to burst out of the thin shell. That did nothing to clear Moi's confusion. Izuku thanked for the bagels and took off to his home without another word. He had a new training plan to write down. Months later, 9 months had passed. 9 months of theorizing and practicing, of training both physical and power-related, of exploring his unmapped abilities, which, sometimes, feel like they want to remain a mystery. Izuku's white eyes locked onto the big initials at the prestigious school's gate. Ready or not, I am here. List of Diamond Deku's powers. Ones he can control. These powers can be called upon easily with training. Bubbles. He can create translucent white bubbles. The time required depends on hardness and, slightly less, on the size intended for the bubble. Soft bubbles used for storing his belongings are instantaneous. Hard bubbles used for combat require more. An effective way of cutting down on the needed time is to create small but very tough ones, called cannon bubbles. Bubbles are all very light, regardless of size and toughness, so they can be easily tossed or shot. For offensive purposes, cannon bubbles can be fired like bullets against enemies. In time, Izuku learned to command bubbles remotely, so long they're not too far away. Light. Izuku is able to project light from his diamond. If he concentrates, the light can be energized and fired as a laser. He is also capable of channeling the power through his arms and shoot it from his hands. But it's far less efficient and the light disperses in a short distance. Shooting light from the arms is useless for any purposes, and shooting from his diamond always gets the aim a little off. However, Izuku found a way around this problem. Ones he can't control, Izuku's most powerful abilities can't be controlled at will, no matter how much he tries to train. They only manifest when his life is in danger. Mind Wipe erases memories. The most recent ability, discovered when Izuku was attacked by the sludge villain. His diamond emits a flash of light that knocks out the enemy, whom would wake up later with a period of hours missing from their memory. The light of the sun reflected on Izuku's diamond as he gazed up to see the massive gate. Behind it was the battleground where their cotter would be facing their entrance exam. Hum, pop, hum, pop, hum. Will you kindly stop that? Izuku looked up to see a tall, blue-haired boy with glasses glaring down at him. It was the boy who called him out for muttering during the orientation by Present Mike. What? The white-haired blinked in confusion. That what you are doing with your quirk? He indicated the new bubble in Izuku's hands. To pass the time he had been making bubbles and promptly popped them. It's distracting the other contestants. Izuku slowly looked at everyone else. Nobody was paying special attention at him. Only a few scattered, brief glances. Nobody seems really disturbed. Izuku shrugged. The glasses boy scowled and adjusted his glasses. We are all mentally preparing ourselves for a strenuous test. Yet you don't appear to be taking this seriously enough. Is with this unpreoccupied attitude of yours you intend to become a pro hero? Izuku shook his head. No, that's what my smile and positive attitude is for. A hero makes everything better, and the first step is to make people feel better with a smile. To illustrate his point, Izuku showed his trademark smile, which he had been told put people off. The glasses boy looked disturbed and replied, "You are far too naive to be hero." He left Izuku feeling a little miffed. Nothing worthy of note happened until Present Mike loudly announced the start of the exam. I really should have trained some more. Izuku berated himself for not having dedicated more time and effort in building up his stamina. Of course, he trained his body in the previous months, too. But apparently, it's not enough to compete with everyone else. The other contestants were running ahead of him. Loud noises of explosions sounded from every direction. The mechanical villains Present Mike detailed in the orientation were making their appearance all over the makeshift city. The group ahead of him quickly scattered. Some opted to form temporary teams. The white-haired boy was left on his own. Okay, no big deal. He still had his powers to fall on. At least, the ones that he could rely on. He could do this. An empty store at his left crumbled. A mech running on a wheel, with 2 long arms and a single red optic, a one-pointer. It made a beeline for him. Izuku hurriedly took 3 bullet bubbles he kept on his pocket with shaky hands and took aim. The robot approached fast. Izuku's shaking spread over his body. Dead, unmoving garbage got nothing on the dread this thing sprouted in him. He snapped 3 fingers. The bullet bubbles acted like their namesakes and separated the robot's head from its body. Izuku's trembling instantly became fueled by relief. Thank God I trained my aiming. An extraordinary display of power, but quite lacking in elegance and opulence. Not buy-in at all. Izuku turned to the source of the strange voice. A blond boy of strange appearance, to say the least. His eyes were big and indigo-colored. His face carried a sparkly glow to it, like it was completely natural to his person. His smile was quite angular. I'm sorry, said a confused Izuku, not knowing what he was apologizing for. The boy moved his arms in accordance with his speech in slow, fluid gestures. Like his equally slow, fluid voice was an orchestra and him the maestro. I meant to say, your performance lacks the grace and flash of a hero. Izuku blinked. Despite those words, he didn't sound offended. He had bore much worse from Kaken. Don't know about the grace part, but I can make a good flash. The sparkly boy quirked an eyebrow. In that case, and he broke into a run on the opposite direction. Show me, monsieur. 6 minutes and 20 seconds left. Present Mike announced. Izuku was already on the sparkly one's tail, determined to show off his flash. They came upon a group of robot targets. Quickly, Izuku looked at the bulkiest part of a 3-pointer and urged the energy to be expelled from his gem. Diamond blast. A beam of luminous white punched right through the killer machine's torso, making it explode. Aiming beams fired from his forehead were a bit difficult to aim precisely, and energy fired from his hands was never sufficient to do damage. Oh, quite luminux. The boy spoke for the first time without any trace of condescending or critic. Eyes, not quite as mine. He aimed his lower belly to an incoming robot. Only now did Izuku notice the intricate belt around his naveline with a big lens over it. A beam of clear blue shot from the lenses and pierced through the machine. But it didn't end there. After the deed was done, his beam of light dispersed, filling the air around them with sparkles. Voila! He made a gesture, like displaying his light show as his masterpiece. A true hero makes the world look better by giving it beauty. Izuku was star-eyed. That was awesome. Merci. He made an exaggerated bow. More and more mechs followed after their fallen brethren. Izuku and the show-offish boy finished them off one by one. With every destroyed mech, the 2 aspiring heroes got more and more creative on the usage of their abilities, like subconsciously trying to one-up one another. In a dark room, a group of teachers observed the exam on various monitors. A small group of them, the senior teachers, would be the judges. We have quite a batch this year, spoke a soft, almost unhuman voice. I see several of them are actively competing with each other. That is good. A little competitive spirit makes a fine hero. Other teachers voiced their agreement. One, however, retorted dully. Many of them are treating this like it's a game, enjoying themselves far too much. If they believe that is how a pro fights, they won't last an hour in our school. The speaker's gaze went from screen to screen where he spotted such behavior, including one with a white-haired boy. The soft speaker hummed. You bring about a good point. Perhaps it's best to level up. In the shadows, the person smirked and pushed a red button tagged 0. And this is my light grenade. Izuku showed off his latest invention. He created a soft bubble and placed it against his forehead. Light poured out of the gem and into the bubble, filling it completely. It shone like a mini, warm sun in Izuku's hands. Light grenade. He tossed the luminous bubble with great accuracy at a 3-pointer. The bubble popped and the energy within exploded, destroying the headpiece of the machine. The move also provided a small light show. Very Luminux, the blonde, whom has introduced himself as Yuga Aoyama, applauded controllably. Thanks, since I can't aim very well with my head, I came up with this move. I aim better with throwing stuff. The non-verbal competition was short-lived. A few streets away, there was another explosion akin to a demolition of a building. That meant a new match making their debut. Except this sound was much louder and the earth beneath their feet truly shook. Screams and shouts were heard around the source of the noise. The two boys shared a look and silently agreed to go investigate. In the opposite direction ran other competitors. Izuku gasped upon seeing the reason. A humongous mech, bigger than a 5-story building, holding onto a 5-story building, glared emotionlessly down on them, tiny humans. Gee, that's the 0-pointer. Aoyama hummed. It is quite fortunate. We gained nothing to engage that monstrosity. Izuku's eyes went wide when he noticed a chestnut-haired girl trapped under a pile of rubble, and the 0-pointer moving towards her. He would have moved to go help her, but his partner, rival, halted him. He spoke assuring, "Don't worry, nothing will happen to her." He pointed up to a camera attached to the building, recording the scene. UAS staff has been observing our conduct. They won't let anyone get hurt. Nonetheless, Izuku eyed the girl. She looked so scared, trying to liberate herself. Even though she wasn't in life-threatening danger, her expression cried out for help. How could he call himself a hero if I ignore that? He gave his colleague a steely look. Aoyama, this exam may not be a real thing, but if I let someone in need of help down now, how can I help people in a real situation? He took off in the direction of the girl and the metal monster, firing light grenades, one after another, and some hand diamond blasts at the tank-like tracks of the mechanical behemoth. It did little to no damage. Hey, are you okay? He reached the girl, and without waiting for an answer, he grasped the large concrete chunk on top. I'm gonna try to move it, so you can get out. She nodded and Izuku took a breath. Okay, super strength. Don't fail me now. He gave the chunk a mighty tug. It didn't even budge. Oh, come on. Super strength was one of his unreliable powers, much to his occasional frustration. Need some assistance, Mon Amy. Aoyama was right behind him. He aimed his naval belt at the girl, making the diamond boy skip a beat. But the laser fired was much thinner than usual and began safely cutting cleanly through the rubble. Noticing Izuku's expression, he divulged, I can adjust the width and potency of my laser. Now, he looked at the troubled girl. Rest assured, mademoiselle, you will be out of harm's way. He winked, his face sparkling. The girl looked weirded out but sighed in mild relief and gratitude. Thank you. Izuku got his focus back on the incoming menace. Either it didn't notice them tiny humans, or it was content to just run them over. How long will it take? Perfection can't be rushed, monsieur. Despite the single-long tone, Aoyama's expression did harden, and his pace quickened. He had just finished cutting the biggest chunk into two, which Izuku was able to move away with more ease. Unfortunately, there were more to cut. Desperately, Izuku began hurling light grenades at the tracks of the 0-pointer. Like before, it was fruitless. It felt like an ant trying to bite a giant. He heard a pain groan behind him. Aoyama clutched his stomach, doubled over. Izuku leaned down to try and comfort the Frenchman. For once, his smile looked forced and strained. My quirk has a deficiency. I can only shoot my laser for a minute before I get a stomachache. Maybe I can do the rest. The girl suddenly spoke and with difficulty touched the piece on top of her with all fingers. It began to lift off the ground, but it fell back down immediately. The girl was left puking her guts out. It must have been a drawback of overusing her quirk, too. Worry not, mademoiselle. I will rescue you. Aoyama got himself up with shaky movements. Real heroes don't let something as trivial as a pain stop them. Aoyama got back to work, doing his best to prevent the increasing pain from showing on his face. He's going beyond his breaking point ... and he can will his quirk like moving his fingers. A mixture of admiration and envy filled Izuku. He had such incredible powers that many quirk users would love to have, yet they were no good when he needed them to save someone else. All he could do were light and bubble tricks. Had only he trained his light powers to have Aoyama's kind of accuracy. Of all the powers out there, why couldn't I have a quirk instead of this? He grasped his gem. Even a useless one, at least I would be able to control it. Aoyama gritted his teeth. His smile looked more like a grimace. The girl was sweating bullets, occasionally glancing back to the approaching beast. They were in pain and frightened. Without another thought, Izuku turned against the robot and broke into a run. There was a theory. His uncontrollable powers only seemed to activate when his life was in imminent danger. Colliding with the moving tracks of a giant robot had to qualify. Please work. Please work. Please work. He reared his fist back. Unnoticed by him, his gem glowed and the light traveled through his fist. Diamond smash. The fist coated and energy collided. Aoyama was taught since young age to always look presentable. Gapping was severely frowned upon. But right now, that hard-wired lesson completely slipped his mind. All that was in his mind was the fact that Monsieur Midoriya, whom couldn't do anything to help just moments ago, obliterated the zero-pointer with one punch. It was as if a giant cannon fired from where Izuku had been standing, blowing everything away. The robot's tracks were destroyed and scattered in pieces, like a bomb detonated underground. The rest had tumbled in its back. The surrounding buildings had their fronts ruined, though remained mostly standing. The girl they tried to help out was in the same state of astonishment. Another competitor, one with engines on his legs, assisted Aoyama liberating her from the rubble. Incroyable, magnifique, miraculous, such power. The boy with the engines whispered. Why didn't he just do that from the start? The chestnut asked, not at all accusingly. The dust settled to show Izuku's frame lying on the ground, unmoving. Aoyama and the girl made a beeline for him with the engine quirk user following suite. Other competitors approached as well, curious to see the responsible for ending the metal colossus. The glasses boy kneeled down and checked his pulse. Is he okay? The girl asked worriedly. He looks just passed out. The glasses boy turned to her. He engaged the zero-pointer just to save you. She nodded and indicated Aoyama. He and his friend tried to get me out, but when they realized they couldn't, he went and punched the robot. He did not display such power until now. Aoyama revealed, feeling equal parts mesmerized and possibly suspicious. Is everyone all right? A sweet voice made itself known. A short, old lady dressed in a medical robe walked by and began handing out gummy bears. Does anyone have injuries? He may need some help, ma'am. The engine boy pointed to the unconscious one, gently flipping him so his front was turned upwards. The old lady's seemingly closed eyes snapped open upon seeing his face. She gave him a quick scan and proclaimed, he is merely exhausted. Nothing a quick nap won't fix. If you could please take him to one of the gurneys. I have others to attend to. Without another word, she turned to the others, asking for injuries. Who is that? The girl asked. That is Mademoiselle Recovery Girl, lead medical staff member of UA. Her quirk allows her to heal injuries with a kiss. Aoyama supplied. The girl opted to not comment that. For a healer, she didn't seem particularly caring about the diamond boy. The engine boy diligently carried Izuku to a gurney where he slept profoundly. Izuku was surrounded by darkness. He was the brightest light. He was the sun that burnt in the day and the night, the light that illuminated everything, magnificent, unending, perfect, as it should be. All around him were the lesser lights, so small, so flawed, so ephemeral. He was here to make them better, to guide them, to correct them, and, if need be, to snuff them out, as it should be. Close to him were three lesser lights that were closer to his state of perfection. Closer, only, as it should be. A yellow star, so strong, so hot, so full of power, but so easy to snuff out when its hard shell is broken. Then there's the blue star, so beautiful, so dignified, but so unable to guide herself alone, relying on other for direction. Blue and yellow, despite their flaws, small as they were, understood their place in the sky. Finally, there was the pink star, so rebellious, so unruly, so childish, so inconvenient to keep around, and yet so cute, so precious. Despite the pink star carrying many more defects than its two sisters, Izuku loved her the most. She was his starlight. Oh, starlight. Izuku sighed with a voice that wasn't his own. Do you really wish to go? The pink star wanted to go away, to be out there among other stars. Izuku didn't want pink to go away, but pink had swayed yellow and blue to her side. Izuku could so easily overrode them. They would obey his will, as it should be. But why not? Then go with my blessing, starlight. He fondly caressed the pink light. Then his grip on it tightened, and try not to cause too much trouble, and the pink star departed. But first, Izuku grabbed the pink star before it could get out of his reach. With two long black-nailed fingers, he pulled a tiny speck of light from the star. A little bit of you will stay with me, for you are mine, no matter where you go or what form you take. Izuku let the pink star go and focused entirely on the pink speck. He squeezed it tightly and its hue changed to a pale gray. You are mine, now and forever. If Izuku could see his own face, the smile was borderline psychotic. Izuku awakened sorely to find himself on a medical room. He looked around to see a short, old woman typing on her computer. She must have felt his presence, for she immediately turned to face him. Ah, you're awakened. Good. You must be all rested up. Now, you're free to go. Thank you. What happened? He groggily got up. You activated your quirk at the last moment and punched the zero-pointer, destroying it. The nurse lady explained as if she had rehearsed it. I did. He blinked. So his super strength did manifest. Guess the whole life danger theory was pretty much confirmed. The nurse scrutinized him before saying, I should tell you that was most reckless, young man. But since you are all right, I will not push it. You may leave now. Izuku got up slowly. His muscles were sore and he felt a phantom exhaustion, but nothing too bad. As he walked to the exit, a thought just occurred to him. "Excuse me, but have we met?" The nurse froze for a moment. She answered coldly, "I don't think so." Izuku blinked. I remember now. Your recovery girl, the healing pro hero." The old woman's frame relaxed a little. "Yes, that is me." What followed were a minute or two of Izuku fanboying, cut short when recovery girl politely asked him to leave. The doctor finished her report on the injured competitors. This year there hadn't been that many, which made her job much easier. That left her more time to make an important call. She opened a chat with her acquaintance. Today was the day recovery girl had expected for almost a decade. She rubbed her left eye, feeling a phantom pain from long ago. On the chat, a message awaited her reply. "Captain Stars, so how was it?" Recovery girl didn't feel her presence, but the boy looks too much like her. It took a while for a reply to come. "Uniform, check. Bow tie properly done. Super check. Backpack with first day utensils, including notebooks for analysis. Check. Prepared for the first day at the top hero high school in the nation. Check." The excitement that consumed Izuku Midoriya was so engulfing that he couldn't sleep the previous night. The dark circles under his eyes showed for it, yet they were easily obfuscated by how much Izuku glowed. The moments when his enthusiasm peaked, his lozenge-shaped pupils would morph into stars. After getting a heartfelt farewell and confident cheer from his mother, the diamond child departed, feeling as if he could shine like the sun. As a matter of fact, he did so. His diamond would emit a little short-lived radiance on his way to the train station. It looked so much bigger from the front gate. Indeed, the top heroic school in Japan was big, but not quite in height. The big was for how large its grounds were. The faculty buildings occupied less than a fourth of the entirety of UA property. Most space was for battlegrounds with faux scenarios, such as the one where the practical exam took place in. Training gyms specialized for many types of quirks and other sites of more hands-on training. A full minute was spent trying to be mesmerized over the scenario before reminding himself it wouldn't do to be late on the first day. The class he was assigned to, one was mostly full already, but no teacher in sight, so he was on the clear. Inside were a few familiar faces. The first one to stand out was a well-known spiky, blonde one, who was being berated by the tall, glasses guy who scolded Izuku back before the exam. And of course, someone else who chose to announce their presence quite vividly. "Monsieur Midoriya, a pleasure to see you again." Yuga Aoyama got up from his seat to shake his hand. Izuku had learned that his new friend was one for politeness. "It's quite convenient that we are on the same class. We will have many opportunities to show which one of us shines the brightest. I look forward to that." Izuku grinned. While he wasn't much for the competition, Aoyama was in the Diamond Boy indulged him. Plus, occasionally he felt proud of himself when he felt he surpassed the blonde. "Excuse me, Izuku Midoriya." The boy with the engine quirk approached them and bowed apologetically to Izuku. "I have to apologize for my conduct during the exam. I judged you as a naive person unfit to be a pro, yet you demonstrated the selflessness of one. Please, I ask that you can forgive me." Izuku raised a placating hand to stop him. Ada was likely referring to his desperate gamble to save that chestnut-haired girl from the rampaging giant mensch. He was about to divulge his super strength didn't even activate half the time when another familiar face showed up. "That white, spiky hair. It's you, the Diamond Boy." It was that same chestnut-haired girl who began chatting, seemingly without needing to pause for breath. The Diamond Boy reciprocated. "You passed, like President Mike said." "Yeah, I got third place. Someone else was tied with me." "Oh, that was me. I'm Achako Uraraka." "That's amazing. My name is Izuku Midoriya, by the way. You know, I just noticed your freckles are in the shape of diamonds." Then a dull voice cut in. "If you want to make friends, go to the playground." "Izuku, Uraraka." Ida and Aoyama gazed down to see something lying on the ground that wasn't there just a minute ago. A giant, talking caterpillar," the diamond child shouted. Turned out the caterpillar was their homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa, a frail-looking, disheveled person who didn't seem to fit the image of teacher at all. Without warning, he commanded the students to get changed for a physical education class. Soon enough, Class 1 was outside in the courtyard. Aizawa announced a quirk assessment test was in order to verify the limits of their abilities. A series of physical fitness tests where they'd be allowed to use their quirks. Izuku knew what would happen next. Despite having no quirk, his powers were often assumed by less wise people to be a quirk. He was snapped out of his thoughts when the teacher called him. "Midoriya, you got third place in the entrance exam." It wasn't a question. It was a fact. With 28 villain points plus 45 rescue points, Izuku had landed himself in third place on the practical exam, tied with Uraraka. "Yes, sir." It was a bit uncomfortable to have those dead-looking eyes nailed on him. The teacher unceremoniously tossed him the ball. "Throw it as far as you can. Use your ability in any way you see fit." Izuku noticed the teacher said ability rather than quirk, but thought nothing of it. He thought for a moment and decided to use something he experimented on the beach. He placed the ball inside a bubble, which made it very much lighter. Then the bubble was pressed against his gem and he focused every ounce of energy he could collect into a beam of light. It pushed the bubble upwards like a rocket of light, high into the sky until it was but a barely visible shiny speck. Izuku grinned sheepishly at the mutters of awe from his new classmates. Aizawa revealed the ball had an altitude and distance sensor embedded within. According to the GPS, it just started falling. Very slowly. It's because of my bubble, sir. I can pop it long distance, if you wish. Izuku proposed and Aizawa agreed, muttering they couldn't wait all day for it to land. The boy sent a mental command and visualized the bubble with the ball inside bursting. He had learned to burst bubbles long range with a lot of concentration and picturing them in his mind. It was easier if the bubble had a distinguishable feature, as in, the object within. Aizawa showed the result. 587 meters. Go beyond your limits. That's the meaning of UAS motto. You'll all take physical tests using your quirks to know your maximum. That maximum will be your starting point in this course. That got the class excited. Thrilled comments flew around. Izuku started muttering, "Awesome, back in junior high, I was never allowed to use my powers, even though the teachers were aware that I have no quirk. Then again, the coach always gave the impression they didn't buy that medical note that I was officially quirkless. Then everything changed when a pink girl said the test would be fun. It looks fun." Suddenly the teacher's tone didn't sound tired anymore. The man's dull eyes turned dark and merciless. "You have only 3 years to become fully fledged pro heroes. Do you intend to go through all of that with such an easygoing attitude?" He smirked viciously. "So be it, then. Whoever scores the lowest will be deemed unsuitable to be a hero and expelled on the spot. Welcome, boys and girls, to the hero course." The glee died a quick death and was replaced by a wary gloom. Izuku shared their fear of being the one to fall in last. Seeing his new classmates in a dark funk wouldn't do. "Come on, everyone. You heard Mr. Aizawa." He shouted loud enough to garner everyone's attention, including the teacher who returned to that dull expression. "This is the hero course. It's only natural we have to do our best and then some more. That's what we're all here for. Plus ultra." And he raised his fist for emphasis. Plus ultra. Almost immediately someone joined him. It was Uraraka. Aoyama was the next, doing a dramatic gesture with his fist and the words heavy with his accent. Next was the pink girl, and one by one, almost the entire class came aboard the positive thinking train. Some who didn't join were the bird-headed boy, the one with bi-colored hair, and Bakugo. Aizawa's voice cut in, threatening to diminish the students again. "Before we begin, Midoriya, perform the ball throw again." That caught him puzzled, and Izuku feared his pep speech had turned the teacher against him, somehow. He prepared to repeat his move, unaware that the teacher's shaggy hair started standing upwards and eyes were glowing red. Izuku performed the ball throw just as before and looked at the man, confused. Aizawa's hair fell. He gave him an odd, narrow-eyed look, then hummed, "All right, Midoriya, I'll take that as your result for the ball throw test." Without giving any more explanation, he commanded the class to get ready for the first test. First was the 50-meter dash. Should probably avoid doing anything like Aoyama. Izuku thought awkwardly. He used his navel laser to fly himself in a straight line and for a moment surpassed his opponent, the pink girl. Right before the finish line, the stomachache reared its ugly head and the blonde fell face first on the ground. The diamond boy felt bad for the dramatic boy. He gave him an encouraging smile. "You did well, Aoyama." And he meant it. Even though the pink girl crossed the line first, he promptly got up and finished after her. "In spite of my embarrassing performance, I could not live with myself if I did not end the race." Izuku refrained from observing that it wasn't a race and he was obliged to end it, either way, but didn't want to bring his classmate further down. On with the grip strength test. Izuku had expected his supernatural strength not to help him out and wasn't disappointed. He got barely a 40 kilograms. Guess super strength took another day off. He muttered, downtrodden. Close by, a girl named Jiru Kyoka passed by and gave him a strange look before shrugging it off. She swore she heard something strange coming from the diamond guy. The long-standing jump, he got luckier. Firing light energy from his hands, he propelled himself above the sandbox. A similar tactic employed by Bakugo. The blonde gave him a glare more menacing than usual for that. During the seated toe touch, he was paired up with a girl with eyes bigger than his, Tsuyuasui. The girl stared at him without expression as she pressed his feet to the ground. But she asked, "What is your quirk about, Midoriya?" So caught by surprise that he paused the exercise for more than a second. A mean look from the teacher pressed him to continue. He tried to answer the best he could under the physical stress. Good thing he had trained his body somewhat during the summer. "I don't really have a quirk, Ribbit." She blinked. He answered in between deep breaths. "My doctor says I'm quirkless, but I was born with some powers that aren't quirk-related. They kinda come from my gem." Close by, another pair overheard that. Aoyama and the pink girl. With the grueling tests concluded, the moment of terror arrived. Izuku was relieved to find he was on 13th place. The unfortunate last place went for a short boy named Minoru Mainta. The Diamond Boy was thinking of what to say to console him when the teacher revealed nobody was getting expelled. That it was all a ruse to motivate them to try their best. Class dismissed. Hit the showers, the teacher announced. All except Midoriya. Izuku blinked up in surprise at him. Aoyama gave momentaneous worried glance. Before masking it under his trademark look, he gave Izuku a particularly more sparkling smile, probably as a mean to cheer him up. Asui and Ashido spare him a curious look as do some others before leaving him to the mercy of their unorthodox, creepy-looking pedagogue. The Diamond Boy opened his mouth to inquire, but Aizawa got ahead of him. You registered yourself as quirkless in your admission papers. It wasn't a question, but a fact. That's right, sir. I am quirkless, he thought to himself. He probably thinks I'm lying like. I am aware of that. Today was proof enough. Huh. For the first time, Izuku saw the man's dark eyes glow red and his hair starting to rise like a soft breeze was blown on them. My quirk allows me to deactivate other quirks. This time, Izuku cut him off. His pupils shaped like stars. You're a Eraserhead, the underground hero. I read what little articles I could find about you. Your quirk lets you erase any quirk. Shota Aizawa was a man who didn't appreciate being interrupted, especially not by a student. He fulminated the white-haired boy with a look second only to a glare from Batman. And Izuku Midoriya continued rambling obliviously about any information he had on the pro currently glaring daggers at him. Aizawa raised an eyebrow at the lack of fright from this unordinary boy. Normally a glare was all that he needed to keep petulant students in line. Problem child. He thought disgruntled and had to raise his voice. Enough, Midoriya. Focus. Despite the tired tone, it did the job of silencing the problem child. As I was saying, that was why I ordered you to throw the ball a second time. I tested my quirk on you, but there was no effect. Aizawa's glare focused on the fist-sized gemstone on the forehead. I went over your medical files and they support that you're quirkless. Yet, by appearance alone, anyone would say you have a mutation-type quirk. Explain now. And explain he did. How he has had the diamond on him since birth, as far as he knew. How Dr. Tsubasa revealed his strange, unique condition, a non-quirk mutation since birth that granted him his power. This mutation of yours, how come I've never heard anything about such thing? Aizawa asked with a sudden frown, as if he was peering into Izuku. Dr. Tsubasa was kind enough to keep it a secret. He said if word got out, the media would be the least of my worries. Many people would be too interested in my mutation. I could end up locked up in a laboratory for research and would never be allowed to become a hero. Silence followed the confession. Aizawa's black pupils continued burrowing into Izuku's white ones. In this course, anyone with an ounce of potential to be a hero is accepted. He uttered like it was a law spoken by God. Pass by recovery girl to get yourself a paper for permission for a DNA test. Ask your legal tutor to sign it so recovery girl may take a DNA sample for analysis. Izuku had a faint smile. You still don't totally believe me, then? The teacher's penetrating look intensified. Do you have anything to hide? No, sir, he replied honestly, and Aizawa shrugged. Then you should have no problem. Now get moving. I'm tired. After a quick shower to ward off the sweat and getting back in school uniform, Izuku headed straight for the Healing Pro Hero's office to fulfill Aizawa's request. Recovery girl handed him over a permission paper with cold civility, and then insisted he left as she had much work to do. Grumpy, he couldn't help but think of the old woman. He had the paper for Mom to sign. That was all that mattered. Now he just had to hurry and get to the lunchroom before the line became exasperatingly long. Sadly, it was a bit long, but the wait was worth it if only to taste the delicious food prepared by Pro Hero Lunch Rush. The next issue was finding a table, one which was quickly resolved by Aoyama, who had a spot saved for him among two others of their class, the big-eyed girl and the pink one. Thanks a bunch. He thanked his friend for the seat. Izuku gave a quick scan of his friend's plate. It was a foreign dish, French he would bet. Noticing his look, Aoyama explained, without being asked, it was confit de canard, one of the finest foods of his land and by far his favorite. Hey, Diamond Boy, I'm Mina Ashido. The pink girl suddenly interrupted. Everything about her was pink, save for the black sclere, the yellow pupils, and her yellow-orange antenna. Now that Izuku got a good look at her, he found himself invaded by a surge of emotion. Feelings that didn't feel like his own, yet they did. For some reason, for just that introductory moment, Ashido made him feel sorrowful and nostalgic of someone. Are you okay? Izuku blinked and realized he must have stared a little too much. Embarrassed, he quickly apologized and properly introduced himself. To finish introductions was the girl with the big eyes and long, green hair that was paired with him for the seated toe touch. I'm Tsuyu Asui, but you can call me Tsuyu. Her lips were wide, her smile sincere and pretty. In that case, call me Izuku. He smiled back. She gave him a look that made him feel he was going through an X-ray exam. Izuku-chan, was it true what you said during the class? That you don't have a quirk? Tsuyu's big, round eyes made her look even more curious. Every eye at the table was nailed on him. Izuku ready himself for it. Yep, as far as genetics go, I don't have a quirk. He passed a hand over his jewel. I've been told I had this diamond since birth. The powers I have are a mutation of sorts that don't follow the rules of quirks, and the diamond is a manifestation of said mutation, as my doctor says. Asai's eyes narrowed just slightly. How is that even possible? If you have powers, then you must have a quirk. Ashido butted in, like explaining 2 + 2 = 4. Aoyama added his own 2 cents. Maybe it is something else other than a quirk, or something new, Asui suggested. Everyone turned to her quizzingly. She croaked and divulged. Looking back, before quirks appeared, superpowers were a thing that only existed in movies and comic books. Nowadays, they're a normalcy. Izuku's abilities could be the start of something new. The white-haired boy stared in puzzlement. Someone actually believed, right from the start, that he was truly quirkless. That was a first. Most of his old schoolmates didn't. Some teachers only after genuine proof was given. Even his mother. Come to think of it, the only person who accepted it just as easily was Mr. Moy. The pink girl leaned over the table to get a closer look at the white gem. It wasn't the first time someone got in his personal space just to look at his diamond, so Izuku didn't feel bothered at all. Her face was a stern mask, glaring at the precious stone. Then it morphed into an ear-to-ear grin and she moved back. I didn't buy this non-quirk thing when I overheard you back in Aizawa-sensei's class, and I still don't. But you look like an okay guy and I like your diamond, so you're okay in my book. Oh, thanks. The white-haired boy didn't know how else to respond. Plus, you know what they say about diamonds, they're a girl's best friend. She had her eyes narrowed at him in a seductive smile. His cheeks warmed. Ashido chuckled at his reaction. To Izuku's silent gratitude, Asui changed the question. Why do you want to be heroes, Izuku-chan and Aoyama-chan? The blonde raised from his seat, performed a perfect spin and stopped in a pose pointing to the stars. I dream of becoming a role model not only for the general populace, but for pro-heroes as well. It is tragic that nowadays there are so many heroes who seek fame, riches, and glory. Hero society has become egoist. But fear not, for future pro-hero Yuga Aoyama will be a new beacon of chivalry and heroism that millions will strive to follow. He finished his little speech with much more sparkling around his face than usual. Izuku and Ashido just stared and Tsuyu proceeded to drink a liquid yogurt. If you wish to be a role model, I advise you to act a bit more serious. Those poses of yours may degrade your future image. You're already attracting a few looks. True enough, some students from neighboring tables were staring, some awkward, others taunting. Aoyama's mood deflated completely. The shine around him died. Don't feel bad, Aoyama. Making hero society better is a great goal. I believe in you. Izuku comforted him and he immediately perked up. Of course the sparkly boys would stick for each other. Ashido giggled teasingly. Izuku looked at her a bit miffed. I'm serious. I agree with Aoyama's dream. There's always room for improvement and hero society is no exception. As a matter of fact, I want to become a hero to make the world better. How so? Ribbit. Just like All Might. Before he showed up, crime was a constant in everyday life. He almost single-handedly ended the criminal activity that existed in Japan pretty much since quirks appeared and reformed hero society. Tsuyu stared at him, not blinking, as if she was scanning him. But why do you want to make things better? Izuku opened his mouth to give an answer, but it didn't come. He found himself asking the same thing. Why did he want to better the world? Why did he strive to help people? He had been asked the same question by grown-ups before, namely his mother and Mr. Moy. He supplied the same answer he gave them. I just can't help what my heart wants. Since I can remember, making everything better has been my drive. Tsuyu hummed. So you want to help people just for the sake of helping people? That's a noble sentiment, Izuku-chan. Izuku smiled warmly. Thanks, she proceeded. Although, there are times when people don't want to be helped, or don't know how to be helped. All Might is a great hero. He almost single-handedly made Japan a safer country for our generation. But not even he can solve all the problems in the world. Ribbit. She paused, seeing everyone's attention was on her. I'm just saying 2 things. First, I think you should figure out what kind of hero you want to be, because there are many ways to make the world better. All Might isn't the only path to that goal. Second, keep in mind that, like All Might, no single individual can correct all the wrongdoings. I didn't realize at the time, but that single conversation would be the first piece to change my perspective. Back then, I was focused on following All Might's footsteps because I felt he was the path to fulfill my obsession. But my obsession was faulty. In the future, I'd come to realize my perception of things was incomplete. I tended to see the bright side too much and ignore the flaws in everything and everyone. I only saw the wrongs that were out in the light. If I wanted to improve anything, I had to become more critical of the bad stuff. At the time, I had no such concerns. I was way too eager for afternoon class of next day, basic hero training. And the teacher would be, you guessed it, the symbol of peace and justice himself. I didn't realize at the time, but that single conversation would be the first piece to change my perspective. Back then, I was focused on following All Might's footsteps because I felt he was the path to fulfill my obsession. But my obsession was faulty. In the future, I'd come to realize my perception of things was incomplete. I tended to see the bright side too much and ignore the flaws in everything and everyone. I only saw the wrongs that were out in the light. If I wanted to improve anything, I had to become more critical of the bad stuff. At the time, I had no such concerns. I was way too eager for afternoon class of next day, basic hero training. And the teacher would be, you guessed it, the symbol of peace and justice himself. Afternoon of the same day. I am coming through the door like a normal person. Izuku was starry-eyed. There stood the #1 pro hero himself. Izuku's whole frame glowed a little, but he didn't even care. Why? Because All Might was here. He wasn't the only one fanboying about him. Murmurs and comments flew around. It's All Might. That's his Silver Age costume. The #1 pro. Awesome. All Might introduced himself as responsible for teaching basic hero training. Under his wing, they would learn the fundamentals of how pros operate. And on their first lesson, class got the bomb dropped on them that they were in for actual combat training. Each class member was given a heavy, armored suitcase containing the hero attire that the support department had designed for them, based on their own sketches and specification. Izuku was eager to try on his. In the male's changing room, a classmate approached Izuku. It was the blonde, short-haired boy with a tail. He believed his name was Anjiro. Say, Midoriya, right? He asked for confirmation and Izuku nodded. I'm just curious, but why don't you have a knave? Izuku looked down at his own chest. Now that he noticed with some pride, he had gained a fair amount of muscle in the last few months. He was more toned than some of the other boy, but others easily surpassed him, Todoroki and Kakin chief among them. Regarding to the blonde's question, it was true Izuku never had a belly button. Yeah, I was born without it. He just shrugged. Truly, in a world of quirks where some humans were anthropomorphic creatures, it was nothing special. The interrogator, Anjiro, accepted that. Moving on, the class entered the battleground modeled after another faux metropolis. Izuku's outfit reflected the sunlight, making him look like a humanoid star. It was a mostly white, spandex suit with some gray elements to it, such as the transparent gray shades on his face, or the iconic, 5-pointed star that adorned his chest. It served as a very light, but resilient armor. The top point covered his neck from all sides. The 2 sideways points were long and covered his shoulders. The 2 lower points stretched down to cover his rib cage but were mostly decorative. A cape with vertical white and black stripes descended from his shoulders. Your outfit lacks complexity, yet it sparkles as you do. A fine choice. Aoyama congratulated, giving a twinkle of his own. His suite was worthy of an exhibitionist knight with a crimson visor and a purple cape with sprinkles. Even his hair shined, making Izuku suspect he put on some special gel while getting changed. Thanks, yours is pretty sparkly, too. Perhaps a bit too much sparkly and show off. That comment came from the ever-blunt but kind Sui. Please, mademoiselle, don't disgrace this gentleman. Aoyama made a face that looked physically hurt. To Izuku it looked like he had just stubbed his toe on something hard, but he refrained to voice it. His friend seemed to have already suffered enough. He gave a quick scan to Sui. Her suite was body-fitting in shades of green, making her more in the likeness of a frog. A notable feature was the pair of large googles that he wagered would make her eyes look even larger. You look cute, he blurted out without meaning to. She croaked, blinking at him. Heat and pink rushed into Izuku's cheeks and he turned away, bashfully. Under the embarrassment, he was so grateful Ashido wasn't around or she might spread some rumors. I mean, you look good. Green is really your color. Thank you, Izuku. And I guess white is your color. How did you come up with it? His embarrassment subsided. Oh, I got the inspiration from a dream. Whatever I was wearing was white and had this design. He T-posed to show off a little. I felt like I could do anything, and I wanted to make that a reality. I guess you literally follow your dreams, Izuku. He smiled a bit awkwardly. All Might called everyone's attention. His first class would skip any kind of basic training and jump straight to combat. That revelation aroused many questions, and all at once that the pro had to nervously ask for silence. Again, he proceeded to explain the exercise. A pair of teams of 2, one playing the role of villains and the other the heroes, would duke it out inside a makeshift building. The villain team would be hidden at the top floor, in possession of a faux bomb to destroy the city with. The hero duo would enter the building and try to reach the bomb, deactivating it by touch. If they failed to do so before 30 minutes passed, the bomb would figuratively detonate, killing the entire city and the villains would win. Not that would be much of a victory in real life, if the would-be villains are also blown up. The selection of teams was at random. The first round was Uraraka and Kakin as the heroes against Minoru Mainta and Meshurao Ajiro as villains. The rest of the class moved to an observation room where they could watch the whole battle recorded from various angles. Before the actual battle started, both teams would have a limited time to plan in privacy. I suspect Kaken will enjoy this way too much, Izuku commented to himself. What makes you say that? Uraraka asked, standing close by. He turned around a bit surprised. Others like Aoyama and Asui were looking expectantly. Well, I knew Bakugo before UA. We went to the same junior high. He is abrasive, very determined to prove he's the best. In his view, the only path he has is becoming the best pro hero. He wants to surpass All Might. Asui hummed, looking at a screen showing a scowling Bakugo. He seems rather aggressive in pursuing his goal. A bit too much. That's not the attitude of a pro. Izuku chuckled awkwardly. I know, right? On occasion, I did try to help him, but he always snarled at me, saying he doesn't need a useless jewelry loser like me. And whenever I said I wanted to become a pro, too, he would make fun of me, that my stupid jewelry would never stand up to his quirk, even nicknamed me Deku Diamond. The buzzer sounded and the battle commenced. True to Izuku's word, Bakugo blasted through the entrance and anything that stood in his way to the top floor. A stunned Uraraka was left in the dust. Whispers circled regarding the explosive teen's generously called determination. He first encountered Ajiro, who did well to evade Bakugo's hits, until the ash blonde blew up the ceiling above, trapping Ajiro on the other side and moved upwards. Minda soon found himself against a beast in form of a teen who irradiated a murderous aura. The terrified midget threw a load of purple balls at him in a panicked frenzy. A single blast incinerated everyone. Bakugo lunged forward. Minda ran away. To finish it off, Bakugo incinerated the faux bomb with a blast, growling his catchphrase, "Die." In the observation room, the class watched, dumbfounded and collective jaws dropping. Did he just blow up the bomb? A boy with an electrical quirk, Kaminari, asked the question everyone was thinking. I don't think he'd do it in a real situation. My guess, he got really excited and had to end it all with a bang. Izuku theorized. Truly, he knew Bakugo well enough to be certain he wasn't a suicidal moron. Right, All Might announced, a little confused. Despite the hero team having reached the bomb, Bakugo's actions would have gotten it detonated. Therefore, this battle ends in a draw. Who gives a damn? Bakugo smirked savagely on the screen. Clearly, he saw the whole thing as a victory for him and him alone. The second match was announced, and Izuku found himself branded as a villain and partnered with the tall, bespectacled boy, Tenya Ida. He was the fellow that reprimanded him during the practical exam, but then apologized in the first day of class. A straight, no-nonsense fellow who seemed relatively easy to deal with. His outfit consisted of armor fit for running, complete with a helmet he carried under his arm. During the planning phase, they reached the top level where a new bomb was stationed. Ada chose that time to speak out. We must make a sound plan of attack. Oka, from my observations, Kyoka Gyro is the bigger threat. Her quirk allows her short and long-ranged attacks. So does Aoyama. She is more level-headed, and her quirk doesn't seem to be impaired by a time limit. Izuku was a little upset at that, but let it slide. While Ida prattled on, he momentarily pondered spending his time making a hard bubble around the bomb. Such idea was quickly shot down, as such a large and resilient bubble would take far too long to make. We should eliminate Gyro before they find us. Izuku couldn't keep it quiet any longer. Ida, if you ask me, you're underestimating Aoyama. Ida gestured negatively with his arms, but his movements were so rigid that only added to his robotic appearance. Not at all. I'm merely making a solid, impartial analysis. You are aware of his limitations. I'm also aware he is willing to go beyond them. That's what the motto of UA is all about. During the exam, he let himself get hurt to help Uraraka. Ida paused, seemingly re-evaluating his plan. He inquired what Izuku suggested. The Diamond Boy hummed, not really used to come up with a plan. How about we ambush them? The hero's goal is to get the bomb, not fight us. They wouldn't expect us both to ditch it. Ada was quick to refute it, as if his partner's plan had personally offended him. That is a very bad idea. We cannot leave the bomb unguarded in any way. My strategy ensures one of us stays here. I am more suited to confront the heroes with my engine quirk. Izuku frowned. Your plan is too narrow-minded. It's no different than what the last team did. We should improvise, do what they won't expect. Ida pushed his glasses up against the bridge of his nose. And how does an ambush fit into your plan? Izuku confessed. I haven't come up with that yet. My idea is making it up as we go along. Ida eyed him penetratingly and sighed. In spite of your heroic spirit, you truly are naive. The Diamond Boy would have retorted in kind, if the buzzer didn't sound, marking the beginning of the battle trial. Without a word, Ida put on his helmet, turned around and walked out of the room. Izuku followed. You are not coming, Midoriya. The battle plan says you stay and keep watch on the bomb. Izuku crossed his arms, stubbornly. I never agreed to that plan. I'm going with you. Ada's frame trembled with irritation. I am the most fit to lead our team. Izuku raised his fist. You want to settle this the old-fashioned way. The speedster was shocked at such audacity. You would fight me at a time like this? Izuku blinked. Fight? No, I meant rock, paper, scissors. Now the speedster's jaw hit the floor. He started a rant about childishness and unheroic behavior with the typical frantic, robotic gestures. As Izuku refused to budge, Ada reluctantly relented. Much to the Diamond Boy's chagrin, his rock lost to Ada's paper. The armored hero in training ordered his partner to stay put and guard the bomb with his life. One after the other, minutes passed him by and each made him more bored than the last. On some alternate universes, Izuku Midoriya would be socially awkward and humble enough to obey such command. This was no such universe. A thought struck him. Villains are constantly breaking the law. If I'm supposed to act as one, why should I follow any orders? Meanwhile, Kyoka Gyro hummed to herself, unplugging her earjacks from the wall. Ada is coming. Stick to the plan. Of course, mademoiselle. She deadpanned and listened to the increasing vibrations again, just to be certain it was just Ada coming. Sure enough, there was no sound of that music. French boy, you know Midoriya. You ever noticed a song coming from him? I never heard Monsieur Midoriya singing. No, not singing. Like, a song coming from him, resonating from his body. He looked at her, puzzled. That I haven't. Shrugging to herself, she refocused on listening to the vibrations. Soon enough, the speedy villain appeared, and the first thing he did was chuckling dramatically. So you have appeared, heroes. Prepare to meet your damnation. Is that dork trying to impersonate a villain? Kyoka was ready to facepalm herself. No, villain. You will fall to our shinning might. And of course, Aoyama reciprocated in kind. She did facepalmed herself. And surrounded by morons. Aoyama did a dramatic pose while firing his laser and Ida easily dodged it. The villain waited just 1 second and the blonde ceased his attack to avoid a stomachache. He sped towards the dramatist with the intent of delivering a kick to knock him out of commission. Then that would Gyro to deal with. This was how one achieves victory, whether they are villain or hero, through a coordinated, orderly strategy, not by improvising or making up as one goes along. As the responsible one of his pair, Tenya Ida had an obligation to show his classmates, Izuku Midoriya in particular, to take the hero course seriously. However, his attack was cut short as the ground beneath his feet broke apart. Suddenly, he turned to see Gyro's ear plugged to her boot. The shaking of the floor originated from her boot. She had hooked up one of her earjacks to her boot that emitted vibrations to the ground. She can make the ground vibrate. Ida's hesitation was taken advantage of by Aoyama, who fired another naval laser. The armored villain avoided the hit, but his approach was ruined. The Bluenet retreated somewhat to reevaluate the situation. Aoyama stood at the front with Gyro in the rear guard. It was a logical tactic, he admitted. She could provide a defense by destabilizing his approach while Aoyama provided the offensive with his long-range quirk. No doubt thought up by the female hero. My goal hasn't changed. Gyro is the brain of their team. I will have to push it close to burst. Doing so would give him a boost in speed at the cost of overheating and disabling his engines for a few seconds. But if he could get past Aoyama and get the jump on Gyro, it would be worth it. Half-power recipro burst. Ida was launched forward with tremendous speed. He passed over Aoyama before the blonde realized what was going on and was standing before Gyro. Deactivating the overdrive, he delivered an incapacitating kick. It connected and she was tossed against a wall, half knocked out. Ada was unable to bind her with the tape as Aoyama fired a laser in his direction. Ada narrowly dodged it, his quirk still out of commission. He put some distance and waited the 1 second for Aoyama to halt his attack. And halt he did, so Ada dashed for the figurative kill. Ada's strategy had been met with difficulties, but he had proven his mettle by thoughtfully analyzing the situation was deducing the logical route to victory, not though a half-baked plan compensated with improvisation. Truly, Izuku Midoriya was a conundrum. On one hand, he appeared to have the righteous standards of a hero. On the other, he also displayed a naive attitude, as if being a hero is just what most people see on television. I do not think so, mon ami. To the speedster's surprise, Aoyama fired another laser, one from his left shoulder. It struck Ida dead on and pushed him back. He wasn't injured, but rather disoriented. His chest plate was smoking and dented, and his torso felt hot. Aoyama span around, arms spread out. The support department truly are masters of their art. My armor is the embodiment of both finesse and practicality. It allows me to channel my laser through anywhere I wish. Before Ada could retaliate, his whole body was invaded by a burning, painful vibration. He turned around to see Gyro was back on her feet and had stabbed him with her earplugs. Ada felt a weakness wash over him and he nearly collapsed. "The luck, Ada. Maybe next time," she said with just a little bit of smug. She pulled something out of her pocket, a roll of capture tab. It was then Ada realized he had failed, remarkably, misanalyzed the situation and underestimated his enemies. Failed as a hero in training. Tensei wouldn't. Have no fear. Why? Because I am here. Without warning, Izuku Midoriya came running in. From his spot on the ground, he was no longer plugged in. He noticed his partner's frame was emitting a faint light. A fine entrance, my worthy enemy. Aoyama applauded genuinely. Gyro groaned and went for the attack. Izuku instantly placed all index and middle fingers against his temple and shouted, "Ida, close your eyes." Wah! Solar flare. His diamond shone like a supernova, painting the entire place in light. Gyro was blinded by the assault. Izuku, unaffected by the light due to his shades, ran towards Ida and helped him up. "Midoriya, you were supposed to be guarding the bomb." Ida berated, still blinded. "You sounded like you needed help." Ida didn't retort right away. "You would have done better to warn me first. I can't see anything." "Didn't you close your eyes like I told you?" Izuku's body was assaulted by the same burning vibration that Ida had been. He turned around and saw that, despite still being blinded, Gyro had figured out where he was. Note to self, don't bicker with my partner if there's an enemy with a hearing quirk. Gyro made a strange face and suddenly let go of him. She made a break for the stairs to the upper level, where the bomb was. Ida, who had recovered a little from her attack in Izuku's flash, got up and followed after her. There was no way he was going to let himself lose, least of all because of his partner's blunder. "Midoriya, stay here." "Wait," I said up. Without another word, he sped after her as much as his engines could. At the moment, Izuku gritted his teeth. "Come on, Ida. How hard is it to listen to me?" He checked his comm link to relay the message, but there was no response. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted an incoming laser which he dodged. "I will be your opponent, Mon Ami." Izuku sighed. "I have to warn Ida, or at least use my trump card. Better finish Aoyama quick or at least get away from him. My adversary, let us fight to our heart's content and prove once and for all which one of us shines brightest." In spite of the situation, the Diamond Boy couldn't help but smile. "Wouldn't have it any other way, my adversary." Ida quickly recovered in full from Gyro's attack and easily got ahead of her. Right after she reached the 5th floor where the bomb was hidden, she attempted to break the floor behind her, but Ida wouldn't fall for that again and gained enough speed to race over the walls and landed ahead of her. "You're not moving any further, hero." But in the worst of all coincidences, his foot pressed a spot on the floor that Izuku had used his unique powers on. Izuku could sometimes get easily sidetracked, but not now. He had thought ahead and opted to keep evasive during his brief battle with Aoyama. The first chance he spotted, Izuku turned tail and ran away, leaving an indignant blonde behind. "I'll apologize later," he promised himself. It's not that he didn't like to win against his friend, but for his strategy to work, he needed to concentrate, and he certainly wouldn't be able to battle and focus on what he left hidden on the top floor at the same time. Flashback. "So I can't come up with a good plan, Ida?" Izuku grinned to himself, producing yet another small bubble filled with his white, powered light. He gently placed it underneath the rubbish that covered the corridor. He had made his way out of the room containing the bomb, slowly creating bubbles filled with energy and hiding them on the floor. The path to the bomb was now a subtle trap. Improvised landmines. He smiled at his finished work. Better yet, he had trained his mental capacity to burst the bubbles at long range. He would have to concentrate hard enough, but if done right, the moment someone stepped on one of them, Izuku could detonate them with his mind, even if he was at the bottom floor. End of flashback. To his luck, an empty room was quick to be found. Izuku silently went in, making sure Aoyama wasn't on his tail. There was no light, which made it all the better. In the darkness, it was as if his eyes were closed, making it easy to concentrate on the mental endeavor. Reaching out for the hidden bubble was easy enough. Despite being 2 floors up, given that the landmine bubbles were loaded with energy, they were easy to sense, like pulsars radiating in the darkness. He grinned, focusing on the one bubble that was being pressed by the enemy's foot, and it popped. With Ida versus Gyro. Boom! Gyro cried out and instinctively stepped back when the floor beneath Ida exploded in a white burst of light. The explosion was localized enough not to harm her, but the armored villain was blasted upwards. He made a comical imprint of his frame in the ceiling, eyes and mouth included, before falling down. Her first instinct was to ask if he was alright, but seeing how quickly he got back on his feet, she figured he would live. "For the record, that wasn't my doing," she declared, being just as perplexed as him. Ida looked her with suspicion and moved cautiously a few steps back. Big mistake. Another explosion from the floor tossed Ida up, making a second imprint on the ceiling. This time, Gyro allowed herself to laugh, yet she had the wisdom of stealthily plugging one her jacks on the floor. Having had a second round, Ida wizened up and didn't take another step. He looked at the ground warily and then at her, eyes narrowed. "I swear, that's..." She stopped herself mid-sentence. Those white flash explosions were definitely Midoriya's work. Coupled by the fact that underneath the floor, she sensed spheres vibrating slightly but with great frequency, those were certainly his bubbles. But why wouldn't Ida know about them? Come to think of it, those two didn't seem very cooperative with one another on the lower floor. "That's all my doing." Ida almost made a move, but hesitated. "You may not want to take another step." He fell for her bluff and didn't move. Her eyes darted around, looking from one spot to the next. In reality, she was making a mental map of the safe spots. Ada's own eyes noticed her earplug piercing the ground and narrowed. Ada was a smart guy and could counterattack or call her bluff any moment. She needed a distraction and fast. Hey, Ada. She grabbed a piece of the floor that broke off in the first detonation. Think fast. She tossed it to the floor in front of Ada where another mine was hidden. It detonated, tossing him back further. Now was her chance. She half-run, half-leaped from one memorized safe spot to the next. She got ahead of a startled, half-stunned Ada. He got up and raced after her, but promptly stepped on another land mine. His bearings were regained just in time to see Gyro making a hard turn to the room with the bomb. His echoing cry was followed by All Might's loud announcement. The hero team wins. On the bottom floor, Izuku grinned, ear to ear. Yes, then his grin fell. Wait, what? On the observation room. The air was saturated with the sound of laughter from a single student. Katsuki Bakugo laughed and chuckled and wheezed his ass off like there was no tomorrow. Deku Diamond, you're a dumbass. Soon enough, the 4 participants returned to the observation room. The hero pair looked quite pleased with themselves. The villain pair, definitely not. All Might asked for who could point who the MVP was. A tall girl, Momoye Urazu, declared. The obvious choice is Gyro. She took the lead of her team and exploited the situation to her advantage on the 5th floor against Aoyama followed her instructions succinctly, but after Midoriya broke contact with him, he chased after without stopping to check if the villain hit himself, which was what Midoriya truly did. Needless to say, Ada and Izuku were feeling quite disgruntled and embarrassed with themselves. Bakugo was giving the white-haired boy a mocking smirk which he did his best to ignore. Urazu moved on to describe the villain team's flaws. As for the villain team, Midoriya left the bomb completely unguarded. In spite of mounting a good defense around the perimeter due to his absence, it backfired against his teammate. Ada, he rushed to face off against 2 opponents at once. He should have either split them up and deal with each separately, or tried to stall their advance with quick attacks that they would be unable to counter while keeping himself out of actual confrontation. Nonetheless, as a team, their main and shared mistake was a complete lack of communication and coordination. As the girl went on, Izuku found himself humbly agreeing with her assessment. He lifted his head and noticed Ada had an expression much akin to his own. All Might declared her criticism to be spot on and turned to all the class. This was just an example of how a battle between good and evil might go. Sometimes villains band together in ragtag teams with not sense of organization, but increasingly that is not the case. To combat the more organized villains, pros who in some cases never met, must team up on the spot. This is meant to teach you all how to cooperate with others on the fly. Don't be discouraged, though. You are all here to learn, not just from your teachers, but also from each other. Take your limitations and endeavor to overcome them. That's what the school's motto is all about. Plus ultra. It was hard to stay downtrodden when the symbol of peace and justice showed off his rousing smile. Just like when Izuku cheered up the class at Aizawa's class, only with more energy and much faster, everyone shouted out the motto. The third match started, with Tsuyu and a boy with a bird head, Takoyami as the heroes. Izuku found himself watching attentively besides Ida. Since entering the observation room, he remained beside his former partner, and Ida made no attempt to move aside. That was no coincidence. Ada produced a sigh which Izuku wagered it was meant to catch his attention. He thought so because he was about to do the same. Midoriya, I have to apologize for my actions. I let my desire to prove myself influence my decisions and acted rashly. Izuku hummed. Yeah, I didn't do that good, either. I should have told you I had booby-trapped the corridor. He berated himself in the privacy of his thoughts, and I should have guessed Ida would overtake Gyro. Make things better. What a joke. There's no way I could have made this thing worse, even if I actually tried. The little diamond asked, why did you want to follow your plan so badly? Ida blinked, taken aback, and replied after a pregnant pause, because I believe I can be a good leader. The diamond boy shrugged. To tell you the truth, I'm not interested in leading, so I can't judge you in any way. He paused to gather his thoughts. In his opinion, Tenya Ida was still an uptight guy with a bit of a control freak edge. He still didn't feel like he could cooperate with Ida, but for sure, he had to try. How else could he improve himself? Ida, how about next time we have to work together, we take more time to talk and plan? He offered a hand. Ada looked at it and shook it. I agree, but perhaps we might have to improvise, as you said. No plan survives contact with the enemy, after all. The handshake had the same feeling as their expressions. It was honest and cordial, but not friendly. They vowed to themselves to do better next time. They'd do it for themselves, but not each other. The diamond and the speedster would work to become proper allies. Yet, that didn't make them friends. For the first half of the decade of 2020, the infamous COVID-19 dispensed immense and unforeseen misery and suffering upon the human race. The cool, moist air of dawn helped Izuku rejuvenate his stamina. He slowed his pace, his muscles pleased with the short reprieve. He paused the audiobook and checked the time. Half an hour. Better than my last record, at least. To evolve at UA, he had to go plus ultra on all of his efforts. In order to make time, he put studying and training into one. Morning runs and exercises recommended by hero training websites while listening to audio books on the various subjects of high school. At UA, even teachers of non-heroic subjects like math and history took teaching to another level. The phone beeped, indicating the break was over. He pressed the audiobook to play and restarted running. Today's morning class started with homeroom. Eraserhead gave a report on their performance in the battle trial class under All Might the day before. Each student was handed a written sheet of paper. Glancing around at the grimacing faces of his classmates told the Diamond Boy the lines were crude and unsympathetic criticism. The sleep-deprived teacher added a few spoken critics as a cherry on top. Ada, for your sake, avoid becoming a one-trick pony. Better than to have a plan of action is to have several. Learn to improvise on the fly. Midoriya, take things seriously. Outside, you have to be in full control of the situation. Leave nothing to chance or it will cost you lives. The Diamond Boy nodded awkwardly. Those were probably deserved, he guessed. After the poor practice Ada and he demonstrated at the battle trial, the runner had opted for a strict plan with no room for improvisation, which led him to be captured. Izuku's idea was more fluid, perhaps a bit too much, as the lack of communication caused Ada to fall for the Diamond Boy's laid trap. Aizawa-sensei announced the class was to select a president and vice. The cacophony that sprang was ended when Ida suggested they have a democratic vote. Izuku stared at the blank piece of paper. An idea had been chewing at the insides of his skull, and he felt it wouldn't leave him alone until he went along with it, despite a tiny part of himself telling him it was a wasteful idea. He threw said part to the wind. The results were pretty split considering virtually everyone voted for themselves. Momo Yaorazu was declared the winner by a total of 2 votes. Opting not to have a re-election for the position of vice president, she handpicked Suiwasui for the job. Phew, Izuku sighed in relief. Lunchtime was the only part on his new schedule when he could totally relax, even though today's homeroom class was mostly mellowed down. He casted a sideways glance when he heard an exclamation of giggles a few tables to the left. The girls of Wano were celebrating for 2 of them having been elected. By that Ashido girls' insistence. In spite of Yaorazu's pleads they should be quieter, the girls insisted on making a little party and congratulating the 2 girls for acing the elections. As the pink girl put it, they congratulated Yamomo's level-headedness and for not being a stuck-up like Ida. And Asui, so calm and collected, would made a great second in command. When Aoyama came to join him for lunch, Izuku motioned to the girls' party with a chuckle. I don't think that party will end with lunch. It is a disappointment I was not elected. Aoyama sighed. Izuku shrugged. Well, we can't win them all. That piqued the blonde's curiosity. I take it you voted for yourself, too. The Diamond Boy almost chocked, feeling a little embarrassed. Yeah, I thought being class president would be a good way to test myself. You know how sometimes having heavy responsibilities makes a person shape up to them. Since Aizawa-sensei said I need to take things more serious and all. He trailed off there, now realizing what a poor idea that had been in practice. So your goal was to put yourself through another test. Aoyama smiled. I should not be surprised. You are always trying to evolve. Thanks, Mize. Trying to become a leader when you feel you are not suited for it is not a very responsible thing to do, Mon-ami. Izuku deflated. Again, thanks. Oh hey, Kirishima. The red-haired, shark-toothed boy returned the greeting as he was passing by. Ashido suddenly got up and intercepted him. She said something they couldn't hear, then became disappointed with Kirishima's reply, whatever it was. That lunch would be remembered an intruder alert. The cafeteria was in a panic that only settled when a third-year student with a strange face announced it was a false alarm. Days later we'd learn the alarm wasn't that false. The afternoon lessons were wholly focused on pro-hero training. Today, under All Might's nubile teaching methods again, they would be reviewing their performances. Class 1 had moved to a computer room where each student could watch the full footage of their battle trial. The number 1 pro declared that no one could reach the top unless they faced up their shortcomings, but advised them to make haste, as they would only have 10 minutes to evaluate the footage. Izuku observed his own blunders with a steely look. He didn't shy away from revisiting his mistakes, although he couldn't deny watching Ada hitting the ceiling multiple times due to his landmines was actually funny. Afterwards, the class was moved to a battle gymnasium where they would engage on one-on-one fights against another classmate. Each student would participate in 2 battles. Victory would go to whom forced their opponent out of the square ring, made them surrender or immobilized them. Izuku's first battle was against a silent, strange fellow named Takoyami. Despite our contrasting natures, I hold you no enmity, soul of light, his opponent said at the beginning of the match as a form of greeting, which Izuku awkwardly reciprocated. All Might offered a few tips on how they could improve. He particularly noted Takoyami's over-reliance on Takoyami's quirk was an odd one, a sentient avian-like being made of darkness that he controlled. He had heard some commenting that the bird boy's quirk was a pretty tough one. As soon as it emerged, it lunged for an attack. Izuku tossed some bubble bullets. It dodged some, but at least 2 hit him, exploding in its face. Dark Shadow stopped dead in its tracks, clutching its body. Realizing that his bubbles could hurt him, he tossed more in an effort to distract the quirk and leave the user defenseless. It was after a light blast that Izuku discovered Dark Shadow was weak against the light, so he unleashed a solar flare, making sure he closed his eyes. His gamble worked as Dark Shadow was greatly diminished and confounded. Izuku raced against his opponent and shoved him out of bounds. The victor promptly helped his opponent back to his feet, in the spirit of sportsmanship. The seemingly antisocial boy held no grudge and even shook his hand cordially. All Might offered tips on how to improve their performance, particularly on Takoyami's over-reliance on his quirk. The matches progressed. Aoyama lost both of his. His second challenge was against the tallest of the class, Shoji Mizo, the boy of multiple arms, somewhat like Takoyami. He was a silent type who preferred to fade into the backstage. The mutant type greeted him friendly. Despite his frightening appearance, he gave off the vibe of a gentle giant. Izuku noted his opponent was much fitter than himself, so attempting to push him out like before was a no-go. Izuku attempted to fire energy beams, but Shoji proved to be fast and agile for his size. When he got too close, Izuku made a desperate move with a solar flare, thinking he had successfully blinded his opponent. Izuku moved a bit away and tried and prepare a surprise attack. Without warning, Shoji grabbed him by the arm and flung him out of bounds. My quirk also gives me a keen sense of hearing, he divulged after helping Izuku up and apologizing if he roughed him up too much. Shoji was truly the gentle giant of 1A. All Might proceeded to lecture Izuku's need to train his reaction time. The rest of the class progressed somewhat dull in Izuku's perspective, probably because he didn't expect any more fight. The one highlight was Aoyama's second match, which ended even quicker than the first. To be fair, that Todoroki fellow was one pretty tough costumer. I'm so tired I think my diamond is about to crack. It felt like a blessing when the school day was officially over as he walked at a slow pace out of campus, thankfully to his morning exercise routine. Most of the exhaustion was mental rather than physical. He checked his cell phone to see what was on the agenda for the rest of the day. Only one appointment, one that he had postponed since last week due to still getting used to the new school regime. I got to make time for them today. Hey, Midoriya. He was brought out of his own thoughts by a loud call out from Ishido. She ran towards him and stopped, seemingly not fatigued. Yo, Su-chan and I were going to hang out. Wanna come with? Izuku considered it. He would rather rest for a bit, but then again there was still plenty of time and he had no plans for a while. Sure, as long it's not too long. We have homework and I have an appointment later. Then he spotted his closest friend approaching. Mind if Aoyama comes too? Ishido shrugged with a playful smirk. Sure, you sparkly boys go hand in hand, don't you? Spare, Ishido shouted. The remaining pins were knocked down. How does that count as a spare? You used up the 2 balls and knocked all pins. There's nothing to spare. Minatist with a patient, knowing smile as if lecturing a toddler. A spare is when you knock down all 10 pins using up the 2 balls. Izuku made an O of understanding. Hisui hummed. Is bowling a hobby of yours? Ishido's idea of a hangout activity was going to the bowling gym nearby. Originally, none of the others were very intrigued by the idea, but the extroverted girl's demeanor swayed them to give it a try. She revealed she herself visited the place seldom. The person at the counter who handed them the balls was a mutant type whose enormous body was made of stone. His mouth was crooked with sharp teeth. In spite of his monstrous appearance, the man's voice was acquainted with and friendly towards Mina. Not that much of a hobby. My dad showed me this once. Used to be a hobby of his. To me it's more like an interesting distraction. If you do not like it, why play it at all? Aoyama asked, so far the least interested in the activity. It's a good way of meeting new people. And sometimes old people. I befriended Kirishima here, even though we went to the same middle school. And that big guy. She pointed to the stone behemoth at the counter. Once, he was looking for a hero agency, but the girls he asked for directions were too scared of him. Not that he was really a bad guy. He just gave that impression. So I pointed him in the right way. Later I found out he works here and can be nice when you get to know him. I learned then that Ishido had her own way of helping others. In a way, she was like All Might, bringing joy and smile to everyone else. So I asked her to teach me how to bowl. Aoyama followed suit, and soon enough, we had fun with a small bowling competition. Then I thought of introducing my friends to a place I knew myself. This is Bingo Bongo Sweets. The owner is a friend of mine. I think you'll find common ground with him, Ishido. After the bowling match was done, with Ishido the unsurprising winner, Izuku suggested they go to a place he knew well. They entered to see the establishment mostly vacated save for a few patrons having coffee. Upon spotting Izuku, foreigner pink-skinned employee greeted him jovially, not just professionally. The Diamond Boy introduced him as the owner of the Bingo Bongo Sweets Bakery, Matthew Moy. Ashido was quite intrigued in meeting someone with a quirk so apparently similar to hers. Though Moy clarified his quirk merely turned his skin pink and nothing else. Still, she engaged the adult in conversation and found him pretty easy to get along. Asui and Aoyama were checking the show window. There are many sweets here I've never seen. My siblings would love this, the frog girl commented. Izuku asked her about them and she described her little brother and sister. Oh, those are crepes. They are a specialty from my homeland. Yep, Mr. Moy makes all sorts of international stuff. Izuku grinned. Asui casted the man a sideways glance. He must have traveled a lot to learn so much, yet he doesn't seem very old. Is baking a family business to him? Most of these recipes could have been inherited from his parents or grandparents. Izuku hummed. Good question. Come to think of it, Mr. Moy doesn't speak much about himself. Only that he came here from America years ago to open up this bakery. Back with the pink pair, Moy posed a question. So why do you want to be a hero, Ashido? She grinned. I like making other people happy and helping others is fun. Moy showed a very small smile. He could tell she spoke truthfully, but there was something amiss. Or rather, something was present that normally shouldn't for someone so young. There was a need, a reason, a motivation behind that desire to make other people happy. It's something that Izuku himself was missing. Good for you, and good for Izuku to be your friend. Make sure that boy keeps his goal as straightforward as yours. Sure thing. The girl wasn't sure what he meant by that, but agreed nonetheless. They left Bingo Bongo, Aoyama and Asui bags on their hands full of baked goods. Ashido suggested they go to the arcade next. Izuku checked his cell phone for time and was disappointed to see it was getting late. Sorry, I can't. I have another appointment. Ashido looked a tad disappointed. Oh, come on. I was hoping to make this a class bonding fun time. But everybody was too busy. And now you're going too, Midoriya. In all fairness, we all just met, so it's normal. Some of us are still getting used to the new routine. Asui's wise observation fell on deaf ears. Well, I've known Kirishima since elementary school. And he was a no-show. Said he has a lot of training to put in, now that he's competing in UA. Izuku felt they were losing the subject and had to remind himself he had to go. Guys, I have to go. There are some people Wait, some people. Ashido's lips curled upwards in a smile. Are you going to meet other people or other girls? Izuku hesitated. He wasn't sure what their reaction would be if they knew. The universe whimsically decided to save him the choice, as Ashido's cell started beeping with a catchy tune. She excused herself and picked up. Turned out her parents needed her home sooner than she expected. Looks like I got to split, too. But how about we take a big one to celebrate the moment? She waved her cell phone to indicate her meaning. They agreed to take one group picture. Mina squatted and extended her hand, hold the cell upwards so that her face was at the bottom of the picture. At her indication, Asui and Aoyama took positions above and at her sides, the girl at the right and the boy at the left. Izuku got the top spot, his face nestled above and between the blonde and brunette. When he asked why he got the top, Mina shrugged and just said he earned it by showing them to Bingo Bongo. Say cheesecake. The picture displayed a rough rhombus off faces. The pink girl at the bottom, frog girl at the middle right and French boy at the middle left. Finally, the diamond child at the top of the rhombus. After a farewell, Ashido and Aoyama went their own ways. Asui turned to Izuku. I still have some free time. Izuku-chan, I can accompany you if you don't mind. It's not that I don't mind. It's just that you might not be interested, Tsuyu. She put a finger to her chin and asked what it was. He answered and she readily agreed to go with. As she followed him, a loud, familiar whistle drew Asui's attention. Ashido hadn't quite left yet. She winked at the frog girl and mouthed the words, "Tell me later." The journey involved some more walking and a bus journey, all while the diamond boy spared sideways glances at the frog girl. If she noticed, she was unperturbed. To increase the discomfort, she didn't even engage in much talk, save for a commentary or afterthought, or the gratitude for showing her to Bingo Bongo. He stopped by a 3-story building with a courtyard surrounding it. It was taller than the surrounding infrastructure, and not sandwiched between others. It looked old, despite appearing well-maintained enough and steady on the outside. Here we are, my old stomping grounds. Izuku sighed with a feeling she couldn't quite place but was certainly not nostalgia. Seize Orphanage. Asui read the title in the large board above the entrance. Seize meant rebirth. The name is just that. Sad truth is, very few kids had a good rebirth after leaving here. I am one of such rare cases. His smile didn't carry that shine that Asui was used to see in class. They went inside to meet a middle-aged receptionist behind a counter. She turned from her computer to give a quick look and a tired smile to Izuku. Hello again, Midoriya. Good morning, Mrs. Eiko. The woman's eyes traveled to his classmate who bowed and introduced herself. Eiko motioned to the corridor to their left. The children are in the playground. They'll be glad to see you. You come here often, Izuku-chan. Ribbit, whenever I can. It's been a while, though. My time here was short, and I barely remember it. Apparently my biological family was killed in a fire that destroyed their apartment building. I don't know a thing about them. Not even their names. When I was 4, my mom came by and adopted me. You live only with your mother. Izuku hesitated. His stepping faltered for a moment. Yeah, my adoptive father, Hisashi Midoriya, left about a year after I was adopted to work overseas. He sends over money every month. He refrained from mentioning the subject of Mr. Midoriya was always a delicate one when he brought it up in front of his mother. Inko preferred to speak of her absent husband only when necessary. So, your mother is the only family member you've lived with, Izuku-chan? He nodded. Are you happy? He nodded again. That's good. After a croak, she continued. In my case, I have a family perhaps too large. I live with my parents and my 2 younger siblings. Sometimes, my aunt stays over for a few days. It can be a house full, but I'm happy and that's all that matters. She gave him a wide smile that Izuku couldn't help but reciprocate. That was probably her attempt to comfort him. Not that he needed such. He answered honestly when he said he was happy with his very small family. But it was still sweet of her. They crossed the doors to the playground outside to see clutches of boys and girls of kindergartner ages playing alone, in pairs or in small clutches. That resemblance of order crashed when Izuku's presence was noted by a lone boy with 4 eyes. It's Izu-chan. The little ones came clustering around the older boy, hugging his legs, speaking loudly and simultaneously. He chuckled and asked for silence, but the children wouldn't listen. So tried a more practical approach, clapped his hands loudly, producing a large amount of sparkles like tiny fireworks that awed and silenced the children. He addressed one of them, a little girl. Okay, what have you been up to, Kiri? I got my quirk. I can sparkly like you. She waved her hands to demonstrate. Izuku attended to a child, one by one, even performed more demonstrations with his light powers to satisfy them. All the while, Asui observed from the sidelines with a wide smile. A little boy of black hair approached her. Who are you, miss? She bent down to meet the boy's face. My name is Tsuyu, but you can call me Tsu-chan. He nodded in understanding. Are you Izu-chan's girlfriend? She croaked and replied steadily. No, I'm just his friend. We attend the same class of UA. UA? Of course the little one wouldn't know what UA is. A high school for heroics. The little one beamed. You and Izu-chan are heroes. He ran off the others surrounding the diamond boy and spread the news. Instantly, what little order Izuku was able to instill collapsed. The orphans started a riot of questions and exclamations. Tsuyu chuckled watching her poor classmate dealing with the fallout. Izuku-chan, you're already a hero to some people. To reinstall order, Izuku gave another surprise that caught Tsuyu's interest. He displayed his right index finger for everyone to see. The appendage emitted a faint glow and started changing, growing a swollen, round tip and hair. In seconds, the finger had become a miniature puppet shaped after Izuku himself, with white hair and even a little jewel on the forehead. Look everyone, it's Minazuku-chan. The diamond boy introduced the shape-shifted finger. Reactions were somewhat mixed. Boys found it either gross and cool or weird and cool. Most girls fell into the category of cute, a minority saying it was gross. When asked for more, he started a session of bubble tricks. Izuku would make bubbles float and the children tried to hop and pop them. Now with hands less full, Tsuyu took the opportunity to ask him about this new revealed ability. Shape-shifting is something I've had for almost a year now. I haven't gotten the chance to train it much. It's really hard and even painful, he said with a sad smile. So I abstain from using it much. Only on my fingers. She adopted that pensive finger on the chin look. So you minimize the pain by restraining that power to your finger. Clever. A bit risky, but clever. The afternoon passed them by fast as they engaged in some games to entertain the orphans. Tsuyu proved to be an expert at appeasing the children. When they would pout or throw a tantrum, she kept collected and argued patiently. Izuku admired her talent. Mrs. Eiko came to tell them visiting hours were almost over, so the UA students excused themselves, much to the kids' disappointment. Izuku promised he would visit again, someday. His pale cheeks reddened with embarrassment when one of the girls demanded that Izuku brings his green girlfriend next, too. To add pepper to injury, the others began chanting green girlfriend in unison. Izuku's pink blush spread to the center, uniting over the skin on his nose. He didn't dare to look at Tsuyu, seemingly taking pity on him. The girl assured the children she would try to come with Izuku next. The pair bid farewell, and only after a full minute of walking did he dare to look at the girl and apologized. She waved it all off and thanked him for the experience. The two went their separate ways upon arriving at the station. By the time he arrived home, the sun had already set. His mom had phoned him on the way, sounding just a little bit worried. He hastily explained the afternoon he spent with his new friends. That relieved her immediately. That night, after a shower and a warm dinner, Izuku had another vivid dream. The kind of dream he would remember in detail after waking up the next morning. It was tempered with a fair dose of ludicrousness. This dream, he and his new friends were spending a day at the swimming pool. The ludicrous part was that Asui's neck was ridiculously long. She wore a yellow one-piece swimsuit. Another thing was Aoyama, who wore a long blue hood over his person. The two sat by the edge of the pool, like they were expecting him. Izuku approached and sat in between the two, with Asui by his left and Aoyama by his right. An excited shout brought their eyes to a newcomer. It was Ashido in a magenta swimsuit. Rather than sit with them, she jumped over the edge and went cannonball in. The three friends were splashed but didn't mind. Ashido became a pink, sunk speck at the bottom. Bubbles raised to the surface, unleashing a melody when each met the outside air. She was singing, "It's a Star is Born," Asui said in an emotionless tone. "Non. It is Tilted by Christine and the Queens," Aoyama interjected. "I still think it's Diamonds by Rihanna," Izuku opined. This Friday had started out as any other day that was steadily becoming Izuku's UA routine, except for the tinge of trepidation over what the rumors spoke of. And today was the promised day of a special class. It was either very good or very bad. Considering Class 1 a homeroom teacher was Shota Aizawa, it was more of option B. Today we will be doing rescue training. Shipwrecks, fires, natural disasters, and the like. The lesson will be lectured by myself and other two teachers on an off-campus site. Per the teacher's order, they collected their suites, changed hastily, and proceeded to a waiting bus. Izuku found himself sitting by Ada's side. The two boys were in an unspoken cordial truce after their disastrous joint performance at the battle trial. "Ada, what's eating you?" The boy in light armor looked at him, like Izuku had said the strangest thing. "Nothing is eating me, Midoriya. In fact, if I was being devoured, I would not be so relaxed." The diamond boy restrained a nervous chuckle. This guy didn't have the slightest idea of slang or was just too literal. "No, I meant to ask why you look so upset." Ada sighed. "I confess I am disappointed with myself. I had hoped to be class representative. I believe I have the skills to be a great leader. But alas, the consensus is that most of our classmates look at Yaoyorozu and Asui for guidance." Izuku digested that. He had voted for himself in hopes that having responsibilities would force him to shape up. In hindsight, as Aoyama said, it was a very poor idea and a waste of his vote. He decided then and there to never tell the bespectacled boy the reason why he voted for himself. No need to make him more hostile. "What would you have done if you were elected?" Izuku asked. That perked up the boy's mood. He spoke dramatically again, making his trademark robotic hand gestures. "Had I been elected, I would have made the class enter this bus in an orderly, alphabetic order." Izuku hummed. "I think that's why nobody else voted for you. Ada, you tend to overdo it. You try too hard." "Trying too hard is what anyone who is proud of being a UA student strives for," Ada retorted, like explaining that 2 + 2 = 4. "Sure, but has it occurred to you that some of your—" Izuku paused to search for a term. "Policies are impractical. For example, that idea of entering in alphabetic order. What would that accomplish?" Ida prattled on about the advantages of entering in alphabetic order, allowing Izuku no chance to comment. The conversation remained mostly one-sided until the bus came to a sudden stop and Aizawa announced they had arrived. The destination turned out to be a large domed structure, easily occupying an area of a neighborhood. The outside of the dome was bare, giving no indication what purpose it served. The teacher and class promptly exited the bus, went inside where they met the second instructor for the lesson, Space Hero 13. A pro hero, potentially a woman, famous for her expertise in rescue missions. She was of average size and wore a space suit that left everything to imagination, perhaps even her gender. 13 introduced herself as the main instructor for rescue training and briefly divulged how their practical class would go. Then she started a discourse about a more serious topic. "Before we begin, let me say something you may need to hear. For those who don't know, my quirk, Black Hole, can absorb anything and disintegrate it instantly. Though I made it handy to rescue civilians, it can easily kill someone if misused. I'm sure some of you possess or have seen quirks like that." She paused for effect. In a superhuman society, quirks with a significant potential to cause damage for the user or others have been certified and closely regulated, so such quirks are often looked as relatively harmless by the general public. However, please do not forget that there are many quirks that can easily kill with the wrong move. In Aizawa's fitness test, you got an idea of your quirk's maximum. In All Might's combat-oriented lesson, you experienced using your powers on others. Today, you will learn the core value of heroism, that is to use your abilities to help others. You don't have powers to use them to harm others. Upon hearing that, Izuku's mind traveled backwards to the incident with the sludge villain. Months ago he was attacked by a villain made of slime and his powers reacted out of whack. Knowing the attacker out, All Might showed up afterwards and picked up the villain. Later a detective went to his house to inform him the captured villain had experienced memory loss. The cause had been Izuku's strange powers. Though he was assured the villain would recover, it fueled more motivation for him to learn to fully control his enigmatic abilities. So consumed Izuku was with his thoughts, he failed to notice the demeanor change drastic and instantly. The lights went out. Something dark and purplish manifested swirling at the center of the plaza. Strange people poured out of the ominous vortex. The teachers tensed immediately whereas the students were confused. Stand back. Those are real villains. Aizawa leaped without hesitation to handle the small army of criminals. The class was rushed to the exit by 13. But their path was blocked by the same dark purplish fog from before. It had 2 yellow, slated eyes and spoke. Greetings, we are the League of Villains. Please, pardon us for inviting ourselves into the grounds of the prestigious UA. We are here to ensure All Might, the symbol of peace and justice, takes his last breath. But All Might hadn't show up. Izuku vaguely recalled Aizawa and 13 whispering something about All Might running late and something about 3, or whatever. Kirishima and Bakugo lunged at the mist villain but their joint attack proved fruitless. Oh, my ... that was quite dangerous. Even though you are still children, it's apparent you show great promise for heroism. My role is to scatter you all and have my associates torture you to death. My apologies. The dark fog surrounded them all. Izuku felt the ground beneath his feet disappear and he fell. Mountain zoned. He landed on his front, rather gracelessly. He joked how Ayama would criticize him for falling with such lack of beauty. A quick look at his surroundings told him he was in the mountain area. Kind of obvious when all around him was rock and dirt. Also the large mountain was a dead giveaway. Another vortex manifested above him. On instinct, he went for a pouch on his utility belt and grabbed 3 bubble bullets ready to throw them at any incoming enemy. To his relief, 2 of his classmates were deposited, Yaoyorozu and Gyro, the former of whom did a short flip in midair and landed on her feet. She must have had training in gymnastics. The girls didn't even have the luxury of collecting their bearings as a third portal appeared, a much wider one. One by one, villains poured out. Obviously, that Warp Gate villain was much gentler when sending over his comrades. I guess we're fighting. The Diamond Boy grinned grimly, still holding the marbles. To the girls' credit, they quickly composed themselves and took battle stances. Yaoyorozu created a bow staff for a weapon. She glanced at her classmates. Do either of you need anything? I'm good. I could use a sword. A blade began to slowly protuberate from Momo's back. She noticed now the majority of their enemies were armed with knives or makeshift swords. Most of the enemies are armed, yet they hesitate to attack. Gyro had her own thoughts, which unconscious followed her classmates' reasoning. They must be wary of what our quirks might be, so they plan to overwhelm us with numbers against a mountain. Izuku made a ghost of a grin. But their fear might work in our advantage. It wouldn't do to discuss a plan while they can hear, unless they don't understand the meaning. Hey, Gyro, remember what I did at the battle trial to get Ida away from you? He gave her a sideways glance, praying to whatever deity that she took his meaning. Her response was just a brief look of confusion and then realization. Go for it. With fast reflexes, she closed her eyes and covered a surprised Yaoyorozu's finger to his temple. Izuku shouted, "Solar flare." The area was bathed in blinding light, which the heroes took the opportunity to escape. Damn, where did the brats go? No way they could have gotten far. The girl with the big boobs is mine. Shut the hell up, all of you, shouted one above all the rest. This villain was the only one not yielding a bladed weapon. His face was concealed by a steel helmet. They didn't teleport away. While we were blinded, I heard them running. The evil Cotter paused in something akin to respect. There was no strict hierarchy in the League, barring the obvious fact that Shigaraki stood atop of the pyramid. The big boss had the League's members separated into parties, each assigned to a different part of the USJ. Whoever led these parties was up to the members to decide. Naturally, this led to some infighting before a leader was decided. But not in this team. No, Deathbolt was infamous enough on the streets to be feared as the temporary leader. The helmet-wearing villain looked down and spotted 3 trails of footprints. They went that way. Deathbolt moved and motioned them to follow. Barring a mutant type of blue skin and 4 arms, this one also didn't wield a blade. His 4 upper limbs were bladed. And what makes you the boss, Deadbolt? The blue, 4-armed cretin was a street thug who got by through petty thievery. One of the few who wasn't fearful of Deathbolt. I don't see what every one of these wannabes is so scared of you. Wordlessly, Deathbolt produced an object from a belt pouch. It was a handheld device similar in structure to a tuning fork. You wanna know why I should be leading, shitstain? For starters, I'm one of the very few Shigaraki entrusted with one of these. The upstart hesitated, eyeing the object like it was a rattlesnake fixated solely on him. You saw one of these at work, right? Want me to test it out on you? And the mutant type backed down completely. Deathbolt pocketed the menacing weapon. But tell you what, you want to go get the first kill, go ahead. Take whoever you want with you. The mutant type was all too happy to do so. He picked 5 others to accompany him. Deathbolt smirked under his helmet as he watched the pawns go first. There's a reason why the pawns always are sent in first. Meanwhile, at the shipwreck zone, are you sure this is a good idea? One Denki Kaminari was hanging nearer and nearer the water, tied by the waist by a rubber rope that Isui and Minta were gradually lowering. Shut up and do your thing. Minta half growled, half pleaded. Kaminari gulped, looking down. The villains kept their distance, like the frog girl said they would. Good to know they were just as scared. Yo villains, get ready for a stroll on Electric Avenue. His left hand sparkled, and, on that moment, the aquatic villains realized how frigged they were. He dipped the hand on the water and the villains were all electrocuted into unconsciousness. All done. I saved the day. Kaminari bragged as they pulled him back up. Wouldn't have been better if you shoved both hands in the water? Mintu inquired. Kaminari gave him a look. Kaminari raised a finger and explained like it was rehearsed. If I did that, they wouldn't be zapped. Electricity flows through my arms like a circuit, and electricity, naturally, tries to flow through its circuit. If I put 2 hands in the water, the electricity would travel from one to the other on a straight line, complete the circuit. The only water electrified would have been the one between my hands. Electricity won't scatter like that. But since I only placed one hand on the water, the electricity spread out to try and find the other hand. Minta just blinked. Isui gave him a studying look. Kaminari just shrugged at them. I have an electrical quirk. Of course I gotta know stuff like this. This was surprisingly easy, Gyro remarked, sounding almost disappointed. Following the solar flare, the heroes in training made their escape deeper into the mountain sector. A hill with trees served as a temporary refuge to plan their next move. Yaorazu was an advocate for playing defensive and waiting for real pro heroes to rescue them. In spite of the situation, she argued calmly that they had no experience and were greatly outnumbered. Gyro protested that may not be an option and that they may have to confront the enemy. Izuku agreed with the earjack quirk user. A moment of thought later, the class president relented. I suppose you are correct. The fact those villains were able to bypass USJ defenses, cut off communications, and were aware of our schedules proves they have this attack planned out. Being proactive and preemptive may be a better strategy. Gyro and Izuku blinked and exchanged a glance. A moment ago, the class president was voting not to fight. Then she changed her tune while reciting several logical arguments. Wow, you sounded like an actual leader. Yaorazu shrugged. I only presented the arguments you certainly thought of. Gyro and Izuku shared another glance. Neither of them had thought of that many reasons to fight back. The trio agreed to lay a trap. From their vantage point, they spotted a good place for it, a cliff at the foot of a mountain. Momo created a blanket over the cliff and covered it with a thin layer of dirt for camouflage. Gyro and Izuku went ahead to meet the villains halfway and slow them down with hit-and-run attacks. Thanks to Gyro, it was easy to detect incoming enemies. When Yaorazu, or Yamomo as she didn't mind being nicknamed, gave them the signal by the communicators she made them, the pair turned tail and lured the evildoers to the trap. The end result, the villains wound up at the bottom of the cliff, dazed or unconscious. That wasn't all of them. Izuku noticed there were only 6. The group consisted of 20 or so. This must have only been a vanguard. Yaorazu agreed. Gyro walked to the edge of the cliff and asked rather demandingly what their plan for killing All Might. It took to the threat of burying them alive, but they called her bluff and kept their mouths shut. To further the kids' distress, the bulk of the villains showed up. This is why the pawns go first. Deathbolt smirked under his helmet. The kids had had enough time to lay a trap, which those 2-bit numbskulls fell for, clearing the stage for his group. Now the pro-hero wannabes had no more surprises. That being said, these kids weren't half bad, taking down thugs left and right while covering each other's backs. Of course, his colleagues had no concept of teamwork and pretty much went one at a time for an attack. What else could he expect from a hodgepodge of low drug dealers, extortionists, junkies, and dumb muscle freelancers occasionally hired by higher criminal bosses? In all honesty, Deathbolt could direct them into something more of a Koei's attack force, but he was no team player himself. Deathbolt believed if you can't cover your own ass, you're not worth the effort or the money. That was a lesson life drilled into him over the years he worked as muscle enforcer and security on illegal dealings between crime bosses. A curriculum he had started building a little before he even became an adult, mostly thanks to his electric quirk, a rare asset it is. But his power wasn't all he had under his belt. No, over the years, he learned how to be observant. The half-naked girl with the ponytail fought with a bow staff, complete with a taser at the tip. Perfect. He pushed another thug aside and lunged to attack her from the front. The girl, probably thinking he was another moron, hit him in the chest with the taser. It tickled. Deathbolt hit the ground and pretended to be out cold. From the corner of his half-opened eye, he was able to keep watch on the girl. He made out some surprised shouts after his defeat. Apparently seeing the leader down caused the others to chicken out. Worthless pussies, all of them. It wasn't long until the last of them was felled and the kids relaxed. The weary creation girl turned her back to him. Perfect opportunity. Deathbolt sprang to his feet and stabbed his gift from Shigaraki in her back. The girl cried out as the weapon shocked her. She stumbled back into his hands. Izuku had his back turned when he heard Momo's cry. He gasped when he saw a villain holding her by the neck with one hand. The big one with a skull-like mask. Word of the wise, brat. The villain sneered at his hostage. When you strike your enemy, make sure they're dead. Let her go. Gyro wielded her sword. You're in no position to make demands. I am. His other hand came closer to Yaoyorozu's face, sparking with electricity. You want her to live, then start by dropping your weapons. The rock girl and diamond boy did as demanded. The bubble bullets Izuku had on his hand scattered on the ground. The villain pointed at Izuku. Get rid of your belt, too. You thought I hadn't noticed you stored those marbles there. Drop him, cursing their luck under his breath. Izuku tossed the utility belt far away and held his hands in the air. Yaoyorozu squirmed. Her face looked determined, then confused. What have you done to me? Why can't I use my quirk? That's right, you can't. Now shut up. The villain face snapped back to Gyro. Don't even try it. You thought I wouldn't see that. Izuku spotted her ear jack retreating from her boot. Whatever move Gyro had attempted was foiled. Now, you the villain meant Gyro. Walk into the pit you dropped these shits in. I bet they're jumping at the chance to pay you back. Seeing their petrified class representative and no other option, Gyro began to step back, slowly. Amidst all the apprehension, Izuku's gem began to glow. I said don't try anything, Diamond Boy. But I'm not. Right then, he felt the vibrations and increasing heat coming off his forehead. Shit, not the time for his powers to start acting on their own. Midoriya, stop that. Gyro whispered through clenched teeth. You could get Yamomo killed. It's not me. The glow and vibrations increased. A headache settled in and was getting worse, fast. That's it, the girl's dead. The villain's hand burst with electricity. No, Gyro cried out. On instinct, his hand traveled to his gem. Light exploded. There was a cry of pain. Blood spilled on the ground. A few seconds earlier, amidst all the apprehension, Izuku's gem began to glow. I said don't try anything, Diamond Boy. But I'm not. Right then, he felt the vibrations and increasing heat coming off his forehead. Shit, not the time for his powers to start acting on their own. Midoriya, stop that. Gyro whispered through clenched teeth. You could get Yamomo killed. It's not me. The glow and vibrations increased. A headache settled in and was getting worse, fast. That's it, the girl's dead. The villain's hand burst with electricity. No, Gyro cried out. On instinct, his hand traveled to his gem. Light exploded. In the span of a second, the light itself solidified on Izuku's hands, taking the shape of something elongated and sharp at the tip. The object extended itself quickly, still on Izuku's hand, and the point was buried in Deathbolt's flank. There was a cry of pain from the man. Blood spilled on the ground. The frightened Izuku let go of the weapon and it disintegrated in sparkles. Blood poured out of Deathbolt's wound. He fell on his knees and tried his best to close it with both hands. Yamomo, are you all right? Gyro hugged her friend fiercely to comfort her. I'm fine. Just shaken. Deathbolt growled. Damn it. Stabbed by a jittery brat. Just my shitty luck. He glared at them angrily. Well, what are you waiting for? Just toss me into that pit, or whatever. Gyro was all too happy to do so, hadn't Yaoyorozu stopped her. She class president insisted he was no threat in his current condition. Izuku was miles away from that discussion. The image of the object he, a moment ago, had in his hand. A staff, or a spear. A long, sharp-pointed object, tainted with blood. I did that. It happened again. It was a repeat of Shinya Fukumatsu, the sludge villain's incident. Another new power he did not know he had just popped up. And like it had a mind of its own, harmed someone else. I am sorry. Really, you're apologizing, you stupid brat. Deathbolt snarled, more irritated than pained. The Diamond Boy turned to the girls, pleading. We can't just leave him like this. Yes, we can. The others need help. Gyro argued. But he'll bleed out. He should have known what he was getting into. Besides, you're the one who did that. Izuku flinched. It was an accident. Gyro sighed. Even so, he was going to kill Yamomo. I know, but what kind of heroes will we be if we let him bleed out? Please, be quiet. The class president ordered waveringly. But the two did cease the argument. She looked at them both, then at the villain, lost on what to do next. Yaoyorozu pointed her staff at him. You were struck in the flank. Not immediately fatal, however. She made an effort, and to her alleviation, her quirk was back in action. Turned out the effect of the destabilizer didn't last long. A bulge grew from her left shoulder, taking the form of a white box with a red cross. There are bandages and antiseptics inside. You can have them if you tell us what your league's goal is. And if I don't? His tone sounded amused. She hesitated at first. Then we'll leave you like this. He pretended to think about it. In that case, I'm not talking. The class president was taken aback but stilled herself. Then we'll leave till you bleed." He chuckled. "No, you won't. None of you have the stomach to kill. That much I can tell. I know an empty threat when I see one." Yaoyorozu's hand shook and she finally relented with a sigh. Crestfallen, she dropped the kit on the ground close by the villain and walked back to her friends, who gave her sympathetic looks. "Let's get out of here. He's no threat anymore," Gyro said, not wanting to be another moment in the presence of that villain. They all silently agreed and walked away. Deathbolt looked at the emergency kit, then at the kids and shrugged. "Hold on, brats. If you want to survive this, stay away from the anti-mite." That made them pause. "Anti-mite?" Izuku asked. "That giant, purple guy with the shiny crystals all over his body. That guy is tough enough to go toe-to-toe with All Might, or so I've been told. You want to live, then don't mess with him." Yaoyorozu blinked. "That's all you have to say?" "Yeah, don't expect me to give anything else away, just because you didn't end me. At the end of the day, I'm a villain." And they left the villain to tend to his wound. Once out of hearing range, Yaoyorozu began to sob faintly. "I'm sorry I couldn't get him to talk." "It's all right, Yamomo." Gyro hugged her from the side. "You acted pretty cool, though. Like a real leader." "That's right. And you cleaned up the mess I made." Izuku tried his best to sound positive and reassuring, only being half successful. The creation girl did perk up a little and even offered Gyro a sheath for her sword. "That was an impressive weapon you made, Midoriya. Were you aware you could create objects, too?" "No, that was all new." Together they walked out of the mountain zone, speaking quietly and always keeping their eyes out. They weren't safe just yet and not keen on being ambushed by a possible third wave of villains. Come to think of it, that spear or whatever it was, it glowed. Not like a shiny object, more like it was made of light. Gyro commented. Izuku gave her a puzzled look. "What are you saying? That I made an object of solidified light?" Yaoyorozu opined. "Hard light has been proven to be theoretically possible. Nonetheless, that spear could just be some unknown, naturally glowing material. It's a more likely possibility. I myself once tried to create a whole new element." She admitted the last tidbit self-consciously. "How did that work out?" Izuku inquired, curious but also cluelessly. Yaoyorozu blushed hotly and refrained from answering. Izuku shut himself up when Gyro aimed an earjack dangerously close to his face. The creation girl looked back at him. "I must thank you, Midoriya. Your plan to save me worked, even if you did hurt that man." Izuku blinked. "My plan?" Gyro was equally confused. "Yeah, you were pretending to have a headache to shoot your energy beams. I've seen you do it from your gem. You were attempting to stun him, but instead you made that staff. It was risky, dangerous, but effective. You saved my life, so I thank you. But I had planned it all, nor any control over my powers. My gem just decided to butt in at the worst time possible. I actually endangered you." That's what he wanted to say, what he knew he should have said. But he didn't. He couldn't live with the shame, the disappointment his classmates would show him. Here he was, Izuku Midoriya, training to be a hero, and, lo and behold, he simultaneously endangered 2 lives. Some hero I was, I thought then. Tragically, Yaoyorozu and Deathbolt weren't the only people I hurt that day, nor were they the worst off. Their cautious walk continued until they reached the plaza. The place was littered with beaten villains of all shapes, some tied up in groups by their teacher's trademark weapon he wore like a scarf. "Wow, Aizawa-sensei did all of this. That's a true pro for you." Gyro spoke rather admiringly. At the center of the plaza, close by the fountain, were 2 other villains. One a lanky, creepy-looking fellow with hands all over his person. The other was a figure they recognized by description. A giant purple guy with colorful rocks all over. "That's got to be the anti-mite," Izuku declared. Their courage faltered a little and they stopped, until Yamomo gasped and pointed at the hulking villain. "He has Aizawa-sensei." A more thorough look confirmed that horrifying fact. The enormous villain held the disheveled man like a limp doll by his head. Bloody and bruised, Aizawa was slammed into the ground, face down. The creature raised a fist. The crystals embedded in its skin glowed and the fist changed shape, becoming a large ball with spikes. It was promptly slammed into the man's back, eliciting a hoarse, pain cry. All their previous relief and feelings of success were forgotten. A new horror of reality settled in. They now realized what their elders and betters had been dealing with. The homeroom teacher hadn't been fighting the purple behemoth. No, was being massacred by it. The beast paused when there was a clapping sound. The petrified children turned their stunned attention to the villain covered in hands. "Good show, Namu." He spoke with a dull, unenthused tone. "But don't rough him up too much. He's the only toy you got until All Might gets here." "T-toy," Yaoyorozu whispered in a faulty voice. It wasn't just horror speaking, though. "Is that what innocent lives are to you?" She didn't raise her voice that much, but it was enough to get the evildoer's attention. Whatever expression he had was covered by the hand on his face. His voice continued passionless. "I'm just doing what any ordinary villain would do. That's how things are supposed to be, right? Villains do bad things and heroes make all those bad things go away. Heroes always make everything better. As the monologuing went on, the neck scratching became more frenzied. Suddenly, his tone became angry, loud, and deranged. Like hell, heroes say they will always save the day, but they never do. And All Might, the worst of the lot. He smiles like it will do a damn to help. The villain was now panting erratically, and the scratching kept getting worse. All the while, the students watched with trepidation and horror, like the madman was a bomb about to go off. Then he stopped and glared at them. His voice was in dull mode again. If you really buy that crap, go ahead, heroes. Try and fix everything and save the day. Namu, break his arm. Aizawa, who was nearly overcome by unconsciousness, cried out when his left arm was snapped like a twig. Yaoyorozu gasped, covering her mouth with shaking hands, her eyes threatening to spill tears. Jiro's whole body trembled, from her hands to her lips. The normally quiet, collected girl was on the verge of a panic attack. And Izuku, he felt something acid and bitter climb all the way up his stomach to his throat, leaving a bitter aftertaste. His hands traveled to his mouth and suppressed the urge to vomit. What was he doing here? For a moment, his brain couldn't give answer. Hours ago, he was just a freshman high school student going on a merry field trip. Then he became boy fighting for his own survival along with his classmates against street thugs armed to the teeth. That contrasting shift alone had been surreal enough to make him wonder if the whole thing wasn't a dream. Now, here he stood, a pro hero in training watching his instructor been treated like a punching bag. This can only be a dream. It had to be a dream. Nothing so inhumane, so cruel could be real. I'm bored. The hand villain sighed and ordered offhandedly. Namu, just crush his skull already. Yet, it was real. It was happening. No, absent of plan or even thought, Jiro and Izuku attacked the Namu before it made a move. The former sent a shockwave via the ground, the latter a white laser from his gem. It did nothing against the silent monster, nothing but made it spot before closing his fist on the teacher's head. You shouldn't have done that. The leader villain turned again to the kids, challenging the final boss before leveling up enough is guaranteed game over. Namu, crush them first. It happened so fast. The beast dropped the near-death man and rushed at the children. In a panic, Yaoyorozu began to produce a Roman-style shield to cover them all, but it wasn't fast enough. Izuku closed his eyes, not wanting to see the inevitable. Place unknown. He opened them slowly when he noted certain death was coming too slow. A frightened gasp escaped him when he saw how close the monster was. Then he noted how strange was that Namu wasn't moving at all. His posture looked ready to pounce on them, but it made no move, like a frozen frame. Also strange, it was toned gray for some reason, as was everything around him. Perplexed, he turned to Jiro and Yaoyorozu, only to see two shadowy figures beside him. They had the vague shapes of his classmates. He could even hear their voices, muffled and incoherent. A look behind the Namu and he spotted what could only be the mist and hand villains, both shadowy specters as well. Okay, keep it together, Izuku told himself, trying to collect his bearings. Somehow, the whole world turned gray. Everyone is some kind of shadowy specter, save for that Namu thing. And said Namu thing is just standing there. All right, how did I get here? I just fired a beam at it. He raised a hand to his forehead to think, and noticed something else. There were strings of light, one attached to each fingertip. The 10 strings split into more and ended in the crystals adorning the Namu. It reminded him of puppet strings. Could it be an idea? Can I? He moved to the monster's left, keeping a wary eye on it, and gave a pull as mighty as he could. And the creature budged to the left, like a puppet following its strings. It works. I can control it. Somehow, he could control the Namu, albeit barely and with difficulty, but he stopped it, nonetheless. In his hopefulness, he looked over to the girls and was surprised to see a third specter standing beside them. A white one that resembled his own frame. Wow, I'm outside my body. Like a classic psychic ghost type situation. Is this a new power or could I be? He chased that morbid thought away. If I can control people like puppets. He moved cautiously towards the behemoth and touched it. Now that was a bad idea. The moment he made contact with the beast, his ears were invaded by cries and screams of agony. Izuku found himself screaming too, and the gray world shattered around him. While that had happened, in the real world, the scene was halted in confused suspense. What the hell is this glitch? Shigaraki growled. His Namu had been a fraction of a second from crushing those brats. Then he stopped, his skin turned gray, and he remained there, unmoving. Shigaraki, look. Kurogiri pointed to the children. The white child, his eyes are glowing. He's the one glitching Namu. Before the villains could spring into action, the diamond boy passed out. Namu hissed and its normal hue returned. Shigaraki barked. Namu, crush those cheaters. With one classmate out cold, Jiro and Yaoyorozu would have met their end, hadn't the doors to the compound been burst inwards and a familiar figure walked in. And he was not smiling. I am here. It was an intense smell that brought back Izuku. The first thing he saw was Yaoyorozu calming him down, holding a smelling salt bag. It's all right, Midoriya. We are saved. Saved? It all came back to him. He looked around in fright, wary of any villain nearby. He and the girls were still in the plaza, yet far enough from the danger zone. The ground shook and he was astonished to find the purple monster exchanging blows with the number 1 hero. All Might arrived just in time. The class president's voice exuded relief and joy, so different from minutes ago. Whatever you did to that monster stopped him for a few moments. Had you not, she turned somber. We would have been dead before All Might arrived. Izuku glanced around and cried out in horror, seeing up close the bloody Eraserhead. The homeroom teacher was lying on the ground, his arm on a sling and a breathing mask pumping oxygen-rich air into his lungs. Ieyasu grimaced. The Namu monster was brutal. I think he even broke Sensei's spine. Gyro went to tell Kaminari, see if he can contact anyone. Izuku was almost afraid to ask. Almost. Do you think he will make it? I did the best I could for him, but if he doesn't get proper medical attention. She left the answer hang. Another artificial earthquake. All Might was now ensnared in the creature's grasp. Its hand had taken the form of long, thick whips, super strength, super speed, resilience to attacks, and shape-shifting. Izuku listed off the abilities he had seen so far. That thing does have multiple quirks, Gyro added. Before you woke up, he also controlled the water of the fountain. But it's impossible for anyone to have multiple quirks. Ieyasu shook her head. Izuku frowned and thought, when that thing was going to attack us, what happened? He asked. Ieyasu hesitated. Suddenly, he stopped midway just before touching us. Gyro and I were just confused. And so was the leading villain. He's called Shigaraki. We noticed you weren't moving. Your eyes and diamond glowing. Was that your doing? He nodded and described his own out-of-body experience. Did something happen with the crystals Namu has? Yeah, they turned gray for a while. Gyro said, dubious as to how that played out. Izuku sighed. I think I got it. Those crystal shards are the source of Namu's power. When I was out of my body, I heard a crowd of whispering voices coming from the crystals. They were confused, scared, and hurting. Somehow, I think those shards are alive. That sounds crazy. I know what I heard. The number 1 hero remained trapped, and now Namu was shape-shifting his other arm into a long spear. He was going to impale the symbol of peace. Good, Namu. Shigaraki was elated. Now finish him. Get a headshot. Izuku again reacted without thinking. In a desperate attempt, he tried to repeat the same steps from before, fired a white beam at the enemy and commanded it to stop. He was back in the grayish plane of existence. The crying voices returned. He glanced at the strings connecting his fingers to the shards. Without hesitation, he yanked as hard as he could. Let him go. All Might's impending end was stopped in its tracks. To his surprise, Namu relaxed his grip on him. You again. He heard the leader, Shigaraki, shrieking and running towards young Midoriya and his friends. Without hesitation, the hero raced to intercept the attack. Fortunately, it never came, for a sudden portal opened in front of the running Shigaraki, taking him back to the side of the mist villain, Kurogiri. Why the hell did you do that for? The deranged man grabbed the mist man's by the collar of his shirt, slowly disintegrating it. Shigaraki, All Might was about to counterattack you. It was all I could do to save you. The underling spoke calmly, like he wasn't being threatened at all. Shigaraki growled and let him go. He glared at the unresponsive Namu and then at his hated enemy, who was now checking on the damned white kid. Young Midoriya, are you all right? The boy broke out of whatever trance he was in and fell to his knees, feeling like he ran a marathon. So much pain. Please, refrain from joining the fight again. Leave this to me. All Might Sensei, those shards are what's giving that villain so many powers. They're alive. The teacher gave him a sideways glance. Are you certain? Izuku nodded repeatedly. I felt them. I heard them screaming. All Might was about to ask something else, but a fed-up Shigaraki hissed, Namu, crush All Might. And don't let yourself be influenced by that NPC again. Use Sonic's spin attack. The creature made the faintest sign of nodding, and All Might gently pushed Izuku back. The villain revolved itself in a makeshift ball of muscle and span like a tire at All Might, intending to run him over. The pro was caught surprised by the new technique but kept steadfast in holding the monster. So instead, Namu disengaged and rotated all around the plaza. It was hard to guess from where it was going to attack next, a fact proven when Namu came rolling from behind All Might and hit him. The pro hero was projected against the fountain, destroying it. Shigaraki laughed and applauded. Namu is the ultimate game changer. All the strongest quirks and gem shards make him the unbeatable final boss for the symbol of peace. A drenched All Might momentarily pondered. Quirks and gem shards. So that guy really does have multiple quirks. And those crystals are not just for decoration. Like young Midoriya said. He filed those thoughts for later and picked himself up. Suddenly, the Namu had half his body encased in ice and incapable of moving. Everyone turned to see 3 new arrivals, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Todoroki. Kirishima went over to Ieyasu, Gyro, and Izuku to check on them. Bakugo had jumped the mist villain and pinned him to the floor. No point saying who was responsible for immobilizing Namu. All Might was about to scold the students for interfering when he caught sight of how calm Shigaraki looked, as if he had not just been left by himself with all his subordinates defeated. "Namu, Kirigiri, free yourselves," he ordered dully. The number 1 felt a sudden heat wave coming from the Namu. The ice melted nigh instantly. As for Kirigiri, from his mist-covered arms sprang an object familiar to the mountain's own trio. Its two-pointed tip touched Bakugo in the chest, shocking him. Kirigiri was able to slip from his grasp. The explosive teen tried to blow him up, but to his horror, no explosion came. "The hell you did to me. These quirk destabilizers are quite useful tools," Kirigiri commented, showing off his piece of high-tech, and returned to his boss's side. Bakugo tried another explosion to no avail. It was Gyro who explained, "It's no use. A zap from those things and your quirk will be out of commission for a while." Bakugo growled. He was very tempted to fire all the sweat stored in his gauntlets at the bastards, but thought better to spare his only remaining ammunition until his power returned. To make matters worse for his ego, Shitty Hair and the punk girl joined his side. "You okay, Baku bro?" Bakugo fumed at the red-haired one. "Don't treat me like an invalid just because my quirk is offline." The battle reignited. "Namu, put that spawn out of battle." Namu raised a fist and all the water scattered around the destroyed fountain began to collect itself into a wave with spikes. The spikes froze solid and were shot faster than the normal eye could see at Todoroki, who was all by himself. All Might rushed in, grabbed the boy before he got impaled, and deposited him close to the other students. "Young Todoroki, everyone, stay out of this." "Like hell I am," Bakugo growled. "That thing had the upper hand against you until I intervened," Todoroki remarked, coldly and without any arrogance. "And I thank you for your assistance, but now leave this to me." All Might gave them a thumbs up and a typical grin. "Watch a pro at work." All Might and Namu raced at each other, but never collided. Namu did the spin attack again, keeping more mobile than All Might was. Often he relied on energy attacks from a distance. While the number 1 could also fight at long range, his greatest advantage was in hand-to-hand. Unless he could get close to Namu, it would be extremely hard to defeat him, something that Izuku could easily see. It's a losing battle. That Namu may look mindless, but it has got a good grasp on All Might's weaknesses. It's fighting him at a distance where All Might's attacks are less effective. Kirishima gritted his shark teeth. "We can't just sit here and do nothing." "I can." He quickly explained his newest power and what it did to Namu. Yaoyorozu was quick to try and dissuade him. "Midoriya, you can't see yourself right now, but you're awfully pale. Whatever this power is, it's very debilitating." That statement brought home how tired he felt. His body didn't feel like getting up. "Still, we are training to be heroes. Doing dangerous things is part of the job. If I can do anything to increase All Might's odds, I have to try." Bakugo sneered. "As if All Might needs your help." Izuku ignored him. Despite knowing Katsuki Bakugo the longest, they were anything but close. The blonde had swatted away any attempt Izuku had made to befriend him in the past. "I might need someone watching over me, though. You can count on me, Midori bro." Kirishima placed a hard hand on his shoulder. "Wanting to help out even if it hurts you is the manliest thing ever. I'll watch your back." Izuku thanked him. Gyro unsheathed her sword. "I'll stick around, too." Todoroki did not take his eyes off the villains. "I suppose I will help, as well. Until I spot an opening on the villains. Count me out." Bakugo would have none of it. He would beat the villains without any extras or Deku dragging him down. Yaoyorozu relented. "So be it. I will be monitoring your life signs. Should your condition worse, stop whatever you do." "Understood, Midoriya." He nodded, a bit taken aback by her intensity. He took a deep, preparing breath to garner his energy and shot a beam of light at the monster that barely hit it. Though faint, the wails of the crystals were still heard. If he focused on their screams, only and tuned out the rest. He was back in the gray mindscape. Izuku tried to pull at the strings, but this time, the creature wouldn't let itself be controlled without a fight. Namu pulled back against him, continuing to fight the big specter that was All Might. "So much paw in. Can't stop. Hurst so much. Make it stop. Help me die. Please, help me. I want to stop this, but I can't do it alone. If this is hurting you, help me stop it." "Break. Break me. Shat terme. Break." Izuku asked. "Freedom. Shatter us." It dawned on him what they were begging for. He just understood instinctively. "No, I can't. There's got to be another way. And us." He shook his head vigorously. Trying to hold the Namu and communicating with the shards had become such a strain on his concentration that he couldn't talk. He could feel his limbs weakening, a coldness spreading all over him. "I won't. I'm sorry," he wheezed. "I'm sick of hurting others. I'm supposed to be a hero. I save people." A sudden sickness struck him. Outside of the mind, the Namu flickered in between gray and purple. Yet, he only stopped amidst his attacks momentarily. Most of the time, the creature kept control and was turning up the beating on All Might. Meanwhile, Izuku spat blood, much to the affliction of his classmates. Midoriya, you have to stop this. You are going into cardiac arrest. His strength continued leaving him. Breath was becoming increasingly shorter. His chest hurt. Izuku now realized he was dying. And his vision blurred. No, the boy wheezed. Everything was turning dark. That all changed when a blinding light erupted from his gem, refilling him with energy. Said energy was channeled through his fingers and the strings. When it reaches the shards, they screamed for a moment. The next moment they felt no more. Arg! In the physical plane, Izuku screamed. Arms flew to grasp his head. His gem glowed. Midoriya. The children were distracted by the diamond boys, while the adults saw that the Namu was doing the same gestures as the boy. Its gem shards glowed as well. Cracks spread over all of them. Shatter. They all broke apart into tiny pieces, not one of them attached to the beast anymore. Shigaraki was seething with all the setbacks. The diamond brat kept interfering, but Namu wasn't too affected this time. Plus, with the party the kid acquired, he wasn't too keen on fighting multiple opponents at once. Now, Sensei's gift to him was paralyzed and lost all of its equips. Don't just stand there, Namu. Kill All Might. The creature obeyed diligently. Only this time, it closed in on the pro rather than use long-range attacks. All Might exchanged punches with the beast when he realized. Young Midoriya was right. Those crystals did give this guy those powers. And now said crystals were gone. All Might turned to his students and felt as someone just punched him in his injury. Young Midoriya was out cold, a trail of blood running down his mouth. His friends fussing all over him in a panic. The number one hero saw red and turned his newfound anger-fueled might against his opponent. Defeated. We were completely defeated. We lost to those kids. All our underlings and even Namu. Shigaraki rasped, materializing on the floor of the bar that was the HQ of the league. And All Might. All Might wasn't injured at all. You were wrong, Sensei. The seething man-child glared at a screen attached to a wall, displaying audio only. No, I wasn't, replied a male voice, soothing and with a sense of command as strong as iron. When this man spoke, even him not being present, it felt as if his words came from an absolute, unforgiving God who could disintegrate mountains. A person that was used to have others obey him without deviance, and experience on how to make people follow him. We were just poorly prepared. Sure enough, it had set effect on Shigaraki, whose tone became much more submissive, akin to that of a child having just been scolded for doing wrong. A second male voice spoke. It had none of the darkness of the first one. A good thing we did it under that cheap League of Villains name. Despite the neutral tone, Shigaraki could tell that damned scientist was mocking him. Then, a third voice spoke. A female one whose every sound was laced with irritation. Enough with casual chit-chat. What happened to our creation? And the equipment I made for you? It was Kurogiri who answered. After a brief hesitation, the Namu was blown away, and we lost all of our quirk destabilizers, but mine. He showed the object he used to render Bakugo temporarily quirkless. What? Exclaimed the second male. After all the quirks we stuffed into it to make it as strong as All Might. His irritation was nothing compared to the females, though. Quirks. Do you have any idea how much of my stock of gem shards I used up to upgrade that hunk of organic matter? 37.3%. That's how much you good-for-nothing, miscreant, uneducated. That's enough, Peridot. Silenced the first voice, the one identified as Sensei. Tamura, as unfortunate as those losses were, they're nothing you cannot recover from. Take what you have learnt today and try again. Yes, Sensei. Shigaraki spoke, still lying on the ground. Kurogiri went into a storage room to fetch a first aid kit to help treat Shigaraki's bullet injury. Now, about something else. My sources tell me the child was on that class. Shigaraki clenched his fist. The diamond brat, he was there. He was to blame for this. He broke Namu. He took away its gem powers. Oh, on the other side of the line, Sensei grinned. The other two listened attentively. The Peridot produced a holographic notepad, ready to take notes. Tell me all about it. Epilogue. Toshinori Yagi lied in his berth, eyes nailed on the ceiling. The events of the last few hours plagued his thoughts like angry wasps. First and foremost were the villains that made themselves known and carried some hate-filled grudge against him. Then was one of such, Namu, who possessed multiple quirks, and possibly some powers that derived not from quirks, which gave him a foreboding feeling in what remained of his stomach. The monster possessed different, completely unrelated quirks, and it didn't appear to have a mind of its own. Those characteristics were grimly familiar to him, symptoms of the dreaded quirk of his archenemy. Recovery Girl returned to his side, bringing his train of thought to a halt. With some difficulty, he asked a dreaded question. How is Aizawa? She sighed wearily and raised the blinds to let the setting sunlight in. Not well. I have him stabilized, but it will be soon out of my hands. His injuries are quite extensive. He almost didn't make it. Arms have compound fractures, and his spine will require surgery. Nazu already arranged things to have him transferred to the best pro-hero hospital in the district. They have experts with more powerful healing quirks than mine. She hesitated and licked her lips. I'm afraid his recovery, if possible, will be lengthy. It's likely Shota will never recuperate fully. The blonde clenched a bony finger, cursing himself for not arriving sooner. The memory of his colleague reduced to a beaten half-to-death bloody pulp filled him with anger. He vowed he would find and put Shigaraki and whatever remained of his league behind bars. After calming his silent anger, he inquired, "And what about young Midoriya?" "In the other room, still unconscious, but he will easily recover." Minutes passed by with only his own thoughts for company. A visit by his old friend, Detective Tsukachi Naomasa, who gave him a summary of Class 1 estate. Eventually boredom wore down his troubled thoughts and he drifted off to a light sleep. Hours later, well into the night, he was awakened by a knock at the door and Recovery Girl opened it. It was Principal Nezu, again Tsukachi, and an unknown young man of pink skin and foreign features. Toshinori greeted his boss first, a close hello to the detective, and exchanged a polite greeting with the stranger who introduced himself as Matthew Moy. "Yagi, I hope you are feeling well enough," the principal wished him. He used his surname out of professionalism. "Not as well as I'd hoped." He grinned with half-hearted humor. Nezu sighed. "I am sorry to cut to the chase, but as you can guess, this isn't just a social visit." The talking animal paused. Moy and Recovery Girl stood beside the principal, expectantly. "In light of recent events, mainly the existence of the villain known as Namu during the USJ attack, we fear that you need to be let in on a secret. You see, I suspect you may have a, shall we say, theory on how that creature Namu had multiple quirks. But from the reports of the students, namely Izuku Midoriya, I have one of my own, and I believe both of our theories are correct." The principal paused as if to allow Toshinori to soak that up. But the number one felt he was being studied. His eyes traveled subtly to the pink man, something that Nezu noticed, for he added, "Don't worry, Mr. Moy is completely trustworthy. He is one of the few in the known of the secret, as is Detective Naomasa." Toshinori noticed that the principal addressed him by his name instead of All Might, meaning this Matthew Moy hadn't been told of his identity as the number one hero. All Might silently thanked Nezu's consideration for his secrecy. So, in this strange meeting, he was supposed to speak not as All Might, but just as another person with knowledge of the battle. Nezu continued, "I am certain that part of that Namu's abilities, such as the shape-shifting and potentially elemental control, was due to those crystal shards it had embedded in its skin." Toshinori put a hand on his chin and played the role of eyewitness rather than just a combatant. "Yeah, hard not to notice those. One of the students, Midoriya, I think, figured it out and informed All Might. The boy used some newly discovered power to stall the Namu, while All Might put a beating on him. Then he somehow shattered those things. Afterwards, Namu no longer used said abilities even when he had good opportunities." Nezu nodded. His tone became somber and mournful. "Tragically, I know what those crystals were. Before I go any further, though, please keep an open mind, Toshinori." The usage of his first name got the number one apprehensive. It was a somewhat familiar sensation of being given bad news. Nezu took a preparing breath. "Those shards were the remains of alien life forms." Silence. Toshinori blinked, certain he misheard. Come again." "Those crystals are the remains of alien life forms." No, he did not mishear him. A longer silence followed, marred only by Toshinori coughing a bit of blood to his hand. He began to fear he was hallucinating from the medicine Recovery Girl forced him to take, or that Namu hit him so hard he was experiencing a delusional dream. The principal sighed, expecting said reaction or lack thereof. "I understand it sounds too fantastical, but, to be fair, the pink man, Matthew Moy, interloped. I accepted it without a problem. Then again, I spent my childhood surrounded by the weird and the crazy." That earned him a sideways glare from the principal, which was easily ignored. Feeling they were dropping the seriousness of the subject and that Toshinori wasn't going to believe them so easily, he figured a shock treatment would have to do. "Toshinori, since you are clearly skeptical, let me inform you that you have been close to one of such aliens for years now." The room became bathed in pink light. Toshinori gasped as Recovery Girl's whole frame glowed and changed shape and stature. The mass of light became taller, but not too tall, around his current height, also thinned and with longer limbs. The light died out and a radically different figure stood before a gaping, wide-eyed Toshinori, skin pale as marble, a long beak-like nose, pink hair tied into two buns on the sides of her head. "See, Toshinori, you aren't the only one hiding their true form," said the pearl that long ago belonged to Pink Diamond. Toshinori Yagi, agape and wide-eyed, stared at the pink and white woman before vomiting a gallon of blood. The pink woman, who was apparently one of his oldest friends, rushed diligently to help him. A full hour passed while mostly Nezu weaved a seemingly fantastical tale about the existence of an alien, sentient species that had had a presence on this planet for thousands of years. A race of female-like, ageless people whose core of their very beings were precious gems and with bodies made of hard light, the gems. According to Nezu, thousands of years ago, in ancient human history, these aliens had come to harvest resources of a young Earth. and would have left the planet a barren husk, hadn't a portion of the invaders rebelled, out of desire for freedom against their oppressive rulers and to protect a planet they did not wish to destroy. These rebels called themselves Crystal Gems. Nezu paused to let the information so far sink in. All the while Toshinori began to truly believe it was all a dream induced by the painkillers. Or perhaps they were all in on a big joke being played on him. A quick look at Tsukachi meant the last hypothesis was wrong. The detective was a no-nonsense man and his face looked dead serious. He turned to the alien woman. God, it felt so surreal. Think of Recovery Girl as such, who lived under the human guise of Cheo Shuzenji. It still racked his brain that one of the oldest heroes to know of One for All wasn't even human. Cheo, please, Toshinori, call me Pink Pearl. Or just Pearl, she said with a tired but comprehensively smile. The one she gave him when he didn't do something that angered her. Okay, Pearl. Were you part of this war that Principal Nezu spoke of? Her smile turned somber. No, I didn't fight on either side. I was ... out of commission at the time. Talk about cryptic. But Toshinori didn't push it as he had enough stuff for his brain to digest. Let's say that I accept what you're telling me. How does that factor into that Namu fellow? In due time, Nezu waved a paw and carried on. Now, to keep it simple, the Gem War ended in a Pyrrhic victory for the rebels. That is, they won but at an exorbitant cost. The Crystal's gems succeeded in driving off the invaders, but not before the leaders of Gemkind, the Diamond Authority, launched a final worldwide attack that decimated virtually the entirety of the Crystal Gems. All but a handful survived. The blonde man leaned against the pillow of his bed. I still don't see how this is connected to Namu or the USJ attack. Pink Pearl shook her head with a twinge of impatience. Toshi, you are always a scatterbrained one. She spoke aloud. Don't you recollect what Nezu said at the beginning? That those shards were the remains of my kind. Our gems, she lightly tapped the sphere on her nape, are the core of our being. If it's shattered, the gem dies. Toshinori's brain began putting two and two together. He then recalled young Midoriya claiming the shards were in agony. He relayed that fact to his audience, which made Pearl's face harden. Although those gems are gone and impossible to restore, the shards were large enough to allow fragments of their consciousnesses to remain. Disgust and horror took over the number one. Bad enough that someone out there was experimenting with quirks in people for ill purposes, but they were also playing with what was essentially corpses. Corpses that apparently were not 100% deceased. He could only think of one person who was heartless and humane enough to do it. His stomach injury itched. Speaking of Izuku Midoriya, he also factors in this, Tsukachi said, putting his hat aside. As you may know, Midoriya is no ordinary boy. Yeah, I know he is quirkless, yet he possesses a number of different abilities. Toshinori spoke hesitantly. Come to think of it, Midoriya had a gem attached to his body. Was he? The detective's sharp eyes could follow his friend's train of thought. As you may have deduced, Izuku Midoriya is not completely human. He is a gem-human hybrid, born of a human father and a gem mother. And not just any gem. One of the leaders of their kind that the principal mentioned, White Diamond herself. Another surprise that caught Toshinori unprepared. He failed to notice Pearl's arms trembling when the boy's hypothetical mother was named. Diamond. Toshinori blinked. The word diamond had been pronounced before in this revelation. Hold on, aren't the diamonds the tyrants of Gemkind? The ones that the rebels sought to be free from? Yes, they used to be. But that has changed a long enough time ago, Nezu assured, casting a sideways glance at Pearl who turned away. Toshinori heard that young Midoriya is adopted, that he grew up in an orphanage. Could his alien mother have just abandoned him? What was this White Diamond's stance in all of this? He voiced those questions and Tsukachi continued with a shrug. I never met White Diamond, so I'm not the right person to ask. But from what I have been told by reliable sources, is that over time she changed for the better. It would have been very hard for her to change for the worst. Pearl muttered in the privacy of her thoughts. But where is she? Gone, the detective sighed. She doesn't exist anymore, because Izuku Midoriya exists now. Expecting Toshi's blank look, Tsukachi continued the narration. You see, the case of Izuku Midoriya is not unprecedented. About 2 centuries ago, decades before quirks began to manifest, the leader of the surviving crystal gems met a human and fell in love with him. From that union, a half-human, half-gem child was born. But in order for that child to be, the mother, Rose Quartz, gave away her life and gem. The same has happened in Midoriya's case. White Diamond gave up her very life to have a son. Another pause for the hero to gather his thoughts. Does young Midoriya know of any of this? No, as far as we're concerned. I once interrogated him before he entered UA. He struck me as a compassionate young man. If his mother had any ill designs, he is not a part of them. That much I can assure. I never suspected him to be ill-intended. He did risk his life to help stop Namu. Unbeknownst of Toshinori, Tsukachi's remark of Izuku's innocence was not directed at All Might, but rather someone else in the room who had grown very rigid since the conversation turned about the boy's mother. The hero gave everyone in the room a look over. How is it that you lot learned this? Pearl broke out of her tense silence. I've met Steven Universe, and after he passed away, she spoke with difficulty, like reliving a painful memory. I elected to stay on Earth. I didn't feel at home amongst my own kind anymore. Centuries passed and I met Nezu. Somehow he was able to tell I wasn't human. It's all in the smell. The principal tapped his nose with a slight smug expression. ... And I eventually trusted him my secret identity and origins. As for Naomasa, she let the detective continue his piece. It's only natural I know this. It has been a secret passed down in my family. After all, I am a descendant of Steven Universe. Another plot twist to add the list. One of All Might's oldest friends was also half alien. Once more, the detective discerned his thoughts. No, Tashinori, I'm not half alien. Tsukachi shook his hand, chuckling a little. While I have one alien ancestor, everyone else was human. For all intents and purposes, I'm as boring and plain as everyone else. Matthew Moy, who has played the silent observer, stepped forward. As for me, I knew Steven Universe personally. I was born around the same time as he was, under the name Lars. My condition: he passed a hand over his person, is due to his powers. Through a crazy misadventure I nearly died, and he used his powers to bring me back. As a result, I turned pink and my aging slowed down to a crawl. I've been around since then, meeting Steven's descendants over generations. Until a few years back, Pinky, he motioned at Pearl, and Tsukachi asked me to move into Japan to keep an eye on Izuku. The group fell silent, giving the number one his time. Since gaining one for all, Tashinori Yagi felt he carried the heaviest secret in the world. Well, surprise, surprise. There was a bigger, older secret all along. Aliens invaded and fought a war thousands of years ago. One of his senior pro heroes and closest confidants was one of such aliens. His friend, Tsukachi Naomasa, was a descendant of a half-human, half-alien who lived before quirks appeared. One of his students, who had no idea of his peculiar origins, was another half-human, half-alien. And his extraterrestrial parent used to be a tyrannical empress, which brought him to the tidbit of information that sprang the whole revelation: that someone had exploited the remains of these same aliens to power up that monstrosity Namu. Yet, something was off. Someone else knows of this, right? He deduced. The people who made that Namu, I mean. Nezu nodded somberly. Precisely. These people would have to have access to gem technology, shards, and the knowledge. Possibly even have gems working with or for them. As for the identity of these villains, Tsukachi intervened. We've confirmed that Namu's power didn't derive exclusively from the shards. We made a quick DNA analysis and discovered traces of multiple quirk factors in his scrambled gene. Someone who can imbue people with multiple quirks. That narrows down our list of suspects quite a bit. Nezu had a pretty educated guess, and so did All Might. His stomach scar really itched now. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.